The courthouse steps were cold beneath Elena Ward's trembling hands as she signed away her freedom to a man who terrified an entire city. Victor Vale, crime boss, legend, executioner, stood beside her in perfect silence, his ring heavy on her finger like a chain she couldn't break. Her family had sold her like livestock to fulfill a dead man's wish, and she was too broken to fight back. But when Victor's dark eyes finally met hers in that sterile government building, Elena saw something that made her blood run cold. Not duty, not pity, but possession. He wasn't here to save her. He was here to keep her. If you want to see how a marriage born from death becomes something neither of them can escape, stay until the end. And when you do, hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far Elena's story travels. The funeral had ended 3 days ago, but Elena Ward could still smell the lilies. They'd been everywhere, covering Marcus's casket, lining the church aisles, drowning out every other scent until Elena thought she might choke on their sweetness. Her cousin had been 29 years old when the bullet found him. 29, brilliant, kind, and the only person in the Ward family who had ever treated Elena like she mattered. Now he was gone, and she was alone again. Elena sat in the corner of her aunt's living room, making herself as small as possible, while relatives she barely recognized picked over Marcus's life like vultures circling carrion. They spoke in hushed, performative whispers about tragedy and loss. But their eyes were sharp and calculating as they inventoried his possessions, his assets, his unfinished business. No one looked at Elena. They never did. "It's obscene," her Aunt Judith hissed from across the room, her voice carrying despite her attempts at discretion. Marcus was always too soft, too trusting. And now this arrangement he made. "Lower your voice," Elena's Uncle Robert warned, glancing toward the hallway. "He could arrive any moment." "I don't care if he hears me," Judith snapped, though her face had gone pale. "We should contest it. There must be a way to—" "There's no contesting Victor Vale," Robert interrupted, and the name alone seemed to suck the air from the room. "You know what he is? What he's capable of. If Marcus made him a promise, that promise will be kept, one way or another." Elena's hands tightened in her lap. She'd heard that name before. Everyone in the city had. Victor Vale. The man who controlled half the underground operations in the eastern seaboard. The man politicians feared and criminals obeyed. The man whose reputation was built on precision, ruthlessness, and an absolute intolerance for betrayal. And apparently the man Marcus had been friends with since childhood. Elena had never understood that friendship. Marcus had been light and laughter, always ready with a joke or a kind word. He'd pulled Elena out of her shell during family gatherings, made her feel seen when everyone else looked through her like she was glass. The idea that he'd maintained a decades-long bond with someone like Victor Vale seemed impossible. But then, there were many things about Marcus she hadn't known. That had become painfully clear in the lawyer's office yesterday. Elena. She flinched at the sound of her name. Her cousin Patricia stood over her, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of contempt and grim satisfaction. "You're going to go through with it, aren't you?" Patricia said. It wasn't really a question. "You're actually going to marry him." Elena's throat tightened. "Marcus asked." "Marcus is dead," Patricia cut her off coldly. "And you're letting his final mistake ruin what's left of this family's reputation. Do you have any idea what people will say? The scandal of it? A Ward marrying a—" She stopped herself, but the word hung in the air anyway. "Criminal." "Patricia, that's enough," Robert said half-heartedly, but he didn't meet Elena's eyes. "Is it?" Patricia's voice rose. She could say no. She could refuse. But of course she won't, because this is the only chance someone like her will ever have to matter. To be more than the poor relation we took in out of charity. "I said that's enough." The voice came from the doorway, and it wasn't Robert's. The room went absolutely silent. Victor Vale stood in the entrance to the living room, and Elena's first thought was that he looked nothing like the monster she'd imagined. He was tall. She'd expected that. But there was an elegance to him that caught her off guard. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than Elena had earned in the past year. His dark hair was swept back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the absolute coldness in his eyes. Those eyes swept the room once, cataloging every person present before settling on Patricia. "You were saying?" he asked softly. Patricia had gone white. I didn't mean you did. Victor's voice remained quiet, almost conversational, but something in it made Elena's pulse spike with instinctive fear. You meant every word. But since this is a house in mourning, I'll be generous and assume your grief has made you forget your manners. He paused, and the silence stretched thin and terrible. It won't happen again. It wasn't a question. Patricia managed a jerky nod and retreated to the far side of the room like a scolded child. Victor's gaze moved across the other faces. Judith, Robert, the scattered relatives who had frozen in place like rabbits sensing a predator. Then finally, his eyes found Elena. Something shifted in his expression. Not softening exactly, but some of the terrible coldness receded, replaced by something Elena couldn't quite name. Miss Ward, he said, we should speak privately. It took Elena 3 tries to stand. Her legs felt like water, but she forced herself upright and followed Victor into the hallway, acutely aware of the stairs burning into her back. He led her to Marcus's study, the one room in the house that had remained locked since his death, and produced a key she hadn't known existed. The door swung open on silent hinges. The study looked exactly as Marcus had left it. Books lined the walls, organized by some system only he had understood. His desk sat in the center, covered in papers and sticky notes, a cold cup of coffee still sitting on the corner. Elena's chest tightened. Victor closed the door behind them and gestured to one of the leather chairs. Sit. Elena sat. He didn't join her immediately. Instead, he moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the garden where Marcus used to read on Sunday mornings. Did he tell you? Victor asked finally. About the promise? No. Elena's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. I didn't know anything until the lawyer read the will. Victor nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. Marcus was dying for 3 months before the end. The cancer, they told him it was terminal in June. Elena's breath caught. 3 months? But he never said, he didn't want you to know. He said you'd spend the whole time worrying about him instead of living your own life. Victor's voice was flat, factual, but Elena heard something beneath it. Grief, maybe, or the carefully controlled echo of it. He made me promise to take care of you. I don't need taking care of, Elena said automatically, then immediately regretted it. Victor turned from the window, and for the first time she saw a hint of something that might have been amusement cross his face. That's what he said you'd say. He moved to the desk, picked up a sealed envelope. He left this for you. Elena took it with trembling hands. Her name was written across the front in Marcus's familiar scrawl. Read it later, Victor suggested, when you're alone. She nodded mutely and tucked the letter into her cardigan pocket. Victor pulled out the other chair and sat across from her. This close, Elena could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of exhaustion he wore like a second skin. He looked like a man who didn't sleep well, who maybe hadn't slept well in years. I'll be direct, Miss Ward, because I don't believe in wasting time, he said. Marcus asked me to marry you and ensure you're provided for. I intend to honor that promise. Elena's hands twisted in her lap. You don't have to. I'll manage on my own. I've been working at the library, and there's a second shift opening at... You make $9 an hour shelving books, Victor interrupted, and your aunt charges you $400 a month for a room the size of a closet. You have $1,700 in savings and $6,000 in student debt from the nursing program you had to leave. He paused. Am I missing anything? Elena stared at him, heat flooding her cheeks. How do you... Marcus told me. He told me everything. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unsettling intensity. He was worried about you, about what would happen to you in this family after he was gone. They're not that bad, Elena said weakly. Victor's expression said exactly what he thought of that lie. I'm offering you a practical arrangement, he continued, a marriage in name. You'll move into my home, you'll have your own space, and you'll want for nothing. In return, you'll play the role of my wife at necessary functions. That's all. That's all, Elena repeated numbly. I don't expect affection. I don't expect intimacy. I don't even expect particularly convincing acting. His voice was clinical, like he was outlining a business contract. But I made Marcus a promise, and I keep my promises. Elena looked down at her hands. They were shaking. What if I say no? Then you say no. Victor stood, straightening his cuffs with precise movements. But understand what you're saying no to, Miss Ward. Your family will drain you dry within a year. They'll take everything you have and convince you it's your duty to give it. They'll marry you off to whoever offers them the best advantage, and they won't ask your opinion. He moved toward the door, then paused. I'm offering you a choice. That's more than they'll ever give you. Why? The word burst out of Elena before she could stop it. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Victor's hand rested on the doorknob. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, I owed Marcus everything. He saved my life when we were 17 years old, and I never got the chance to repay him. His voice went soft, distant. This is the last thing I can do for him. Duty, obligation, debt. Of course, that's all this was. Elena didn't know why that made her chest ache, but it did. The wedding is scheduled for Friday, Victor said. Courthouse, 11 a.m., small ceremony, no guests. If you decide to go through with it, be there. If not, he opened the door. If not, I'll respect your choice. He left without another word, and Elena sat alone in Marcus's study, surrounded by ghosts and impossible decisions. She pulled out the letter that night, after everyone had finally left and the house had fallen into uneasy silence. Her small room, the converted storage space her aunt had grudgingly offered when Elena's parents died, felt even more cramped than usual. Elena sat on the narrow bed and broke the seal with careful fingers. Ellie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about being sick. I'm sorry for a lot of things, actually. Sorry I wasn't stronger. Sorry I couldn't protect you better. Sorry I'm leaving you alone with the vultures. But I'm not sorry about Victor. I know this seems insane. I know you're probably terrified right now, thinking I've lost my mind and handed you over to a monster. But here's the thing you need to understand. Victor Vale is the most loyal, most honorable person I've ever known. He's also dangerous as hell, which is exactly why I trust him to keep you safe. You've spent your whole life making yourself invisible, Ellie. Apologizing for existing. Accepting whatever scraps they throw you because you think that's all you deserve. I watched it happen, and it broke my heart every single time. Victor sees people, really sees them. Not the version they pretend to be, but who they actually are underneath. And once he sees you, really sees you, he doesn't forget. He doesn't let go. Give him a chance. Give yourself a chance. The girl I knew used to dream about being a nurse, about traveling, about a life bigger than this suffocating family could ever offer. That girl is still in there somewhere. Maybe Victor can help you find her again. I love you, Ellie. I'm sorry I'm not there to watch you become the person you're meant to be. But I think you're going to be magnificent. Marcus Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face, before she finally folded it and tucked it under her pillow. Friday morning arrived cold and gray with the threat of rain hanging heavy in the air. Elena stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying her reflection and hardly recognizing the woman staring back. She'd chosen a simple cream-colored dress, the only thing in her closet that seemed remotely appropriate for a wedding, even one as strange as this. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she'd managed some minimal makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes. She looked pale, frightened, small. That girl is still in there somewhere. Elena took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. The courthouse was exactly as impersonal as she'd imagined. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, the faint smell of coffee and bureaucracy. Victor was already there when she arrived, standing near the clerk's office in another immaculate suit, charcoal this time, with a dark blue tie. He looked up when she entered, and something flashed across his face too quickly for her to identify. "Miss Ward," he said quietly. "You came." "I came," Elena agreed, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "We have a few minutes before the judge is ready." Victor gestured to a bench along the wall. "There's something we should discuss." They sat, maintaining a careful distance between them. "I've had papers drawn up," Victor said, producing a folder from his briefcase. "A prenuptial agreement. Everything I own remains mine. Everything you acquire during the marriage remains yours. If you choose to leave after a year, you'll receive a settlement of $200,000, enough to start over anywhere you'd like." Elena's eyes widened. That's too much. It's a fraction of what I spend on my legal team annually, Victor cut her off. Read the papers, take your time. If there's anything you want changed, tell me. Elena scanned the documents, but the words seemed to blur together. Financial provisions, property rights, dissolution clauses. It all felt surreal, like she was reading about someone else's life. There's no mention of, she hesitated, heat creeping up her neck, of expectations, physical expectations, because there aren't any, Victor said bluntly. You'll have your own bedroom, your own space. I won't touch you unless you explicitly ask me to, and I can't imagine any circumstance where that would happen. He paused. This is a legal arrangement, Miss Ward. Nothing more. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like a door closing. Okay, Elena whispered. She signed the papers. The ceremony itself lasted less than 10 minutes. The judge was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd clearly performed this ritual 1,000 times before. She spoke the traditional words in a flat, bored voice while Elena and Victor stood side by side, not quite touching. Do you, Victor Augustus Vale, take Elena Marie Ward to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Elena Marie Ward, take Victor Augustus Vale to be your lawfully wedded husband? Elena's voice caught in her throat. She felt Victor's eyes on her, patient and unreadable. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang. Outside, the threatened rain had finally begun to fall. I do, she said. Victor produced rings, simple gold bands that fit perfectly. Elena wondered when he'd had time to size hers, then remembered. Marcus told me everything. Of course he had. By the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The judge closed her book with a decisive snap. You may kiss the bride. They both went very still. That won't be necessary, Victor said smoothly. The judge shrugged. Sign here, here, and here. They signed. The clerk witnessed. And just like that, Elena Ward became Elena Vale. The rain was falling harder when they left the courthouse. Victor's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Elena's entire life, waited at the curb. A driver she hadn't noticed before held the door open. James will take us to the penthouse, Victor said, ushering her inside. Your things from your aunt's house have already been moved. Elena froze halfway into the car. Already? But I took the liberty of having them packed this morning, Victor said. I assumed you wouldn't want to return there. He was right, but the presumption of it stung anyway. Elena slid into the leather seat and tried not to feel like she'd just sold herself. The penthouse was in the heart of downtown, occupying the entire top floor of a building that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never heard the word restraint. The lobby alone was all marble and gold, with a doorman who nodded respectfully at Victor and pretended not to stare at Elena. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending into another world. Welcome home, Mrs. Vale, Victor said as the doors opened directly into their living space. Elena stepped out into a sprawling open-plan room that was all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. The view stretched for miles, the city spread out below like a toy model. Rain streaked the glass, turning the lights below into watercolor smears. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was nothing like any place Elena had ever called home. Your room is this way, Victor said, leading her down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than a car. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was easily 3 times the size of her old room. A king-sized bed dominated the space, made up with crisp white linens. There was a sitting area with a couch and bookshelves, a desk by the window, and 2 doors that presumably led to a closet and bathroom. Her meager possessions looked lost in all that space. 3 boxes of books. 2 suitcases of clothes. A small duffel bag of personal items. This was her life. This was everything she owned. The bathroom has a tub and separate shower, Victor said from the doorway. The closet has been stocked with clothes in your size. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, there's an account set up at several stores downtown. Buy whatever you need. I can't accept... You're my wife, Victor interrupted, and the word sounded strange in his mouth. Foreign. You'll dress accordingly. It's not charity, Miss... He stopped himself. Elena. It's part of the arrangement. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. What if I don't know how to be part of this arrangement? For the first time since she'd met him, Victor's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then you learn. We both do. He gestured back toward the main living area. I'll be in my study if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll see you at dinner, 7 o'clock. He left before she could respond, closing the door with a quiet click. Elena stood alone in her new room, in her new life, and tried to remember how to breathe. She spent the afternoon unpacking her few belongings and exploring her new space. The bathroom was indeed spectacular, all white marble and gold fixtures, with a tub large enough to swim in. The closet was stocked with clothes that were somehow exactly her style. Simple, classic pieces in muted colors, but elevated. Quality fabrics. Perfect tailoring. The kind of clothes she'd always admired but never thought she could afford. There was a small envelope tucked into one of the dresser drawers. Inside, she found a credit card with her new name embossed on it, along with a brief note in Victor's precise handwriting. For anything you need, no limit. V. Elena set it aside and tried not to think about what it meant to have unlimited access to someone else's money. To be that dependent. That owned. It's not like that, she told herself. This is business, an arrangement, nothing more. 7 o'clock arrived faster than she expected. Elena changed into one of the new dresses, a soft gray wrap dress that fit perfectly, and made her way back to the main living area. Victor was already seated at the dining table, which had been set for two. He'd removed his jacket and tie, rolled his sleeves to his elbows. It was the most casual she'd seen him, and it made him look almost human, almost approachable. I wasn't sure what you liked, he said, gesturing to the spread before them. So I had my chef prepare several options. Several options turned out to be a full Italian feast, pasta with 3 different sauces, chicken piccata, salad, fresh bread, wine. This is too much, Elena said faintly. Sit, Victor said. It wasn't quite a command, but close enough. Elena sat. They ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Elena picked at her food, hyper-aware of every sound she made. The click of her fork against the plate, the whisper of her napkin against the table. Victor ate with the same precise control he seemed to apply to everything else, and she found herself wondering if he ever did anything without thinking 3 steps ahead. Your aunt called, Victor said finally, after the ceremony. Elena's fork froze halfway to her mouth. What did she want? To inform me that you're ungrateful, selfish, and an embarrassment to the family name. His voice was perfectly neutral. I told her if she contacted either of us again, I would ensure her husband's construction company lost every municipal contract it currently holds. You didn't have to. Yes, Victor cut her off quietly. I did. They fell back into silence. Elena forced herself to take another bite of pasta she couldn't taste. Marcus said you wanted to be a nurse, Victor said, and the shift in topic caught her off guard. Yes, once. Elena set down her fork. But the program was expensive and I couldn't keep up with tuition and help with household expenses, and she stopped herself. It doesn't matter now. Why doesn't it matter? Because I'm 26 and that dream is dead and buried, Elena thought. But she couldn't quite make herself say it out loud. The fall semester starts in 6 weeks, Victor continued, as if she'd answered. I've contacted the nursing program at Columbia. You're enrolled. Elena's head snapped up. What? No, I can't. The tuition alone is paid in full. Housing, books, fees, all of it. Victor met her shocked stare calmly. You'll attend classes and complete the program. That's not negotiable. You can't just decide that I can, and I did. Victor's voice remained maddeningly level. Consider it part of our arrangement. You play the role of my wife at necessary functions. In return, you get to live the life you should have had the chance to live before your family leached everything from you. The blunt cruelty of that assessment and the accuracy of it stole Elena's breath. I don't understand you, she whispered. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. You don't have to understand me, Elena. You just have to let me keep the promise I made. After dinner, Elena retreated to her room and tried to process everything that had happened in the span of a single day. She'd woken up Elena Ward, poor relation, and family burden. Now she was Elena Vale, wife of the most dangerous man in the city, with a penthouse view and a college acceptance letter she hadn't even applied for. It didn't feel real. She changed into pajamas. Silk, expensive, nothing like the worn cotton she was used to, and was about to climb into bed when she heard it. Music. Piano music. Drifting from somewhere else in the penthouse. Elena followed the sound down the hallway, past the living room, to a door she hadn't noticed earlier. It was slightly ajar, and through the gap she could see Victor seated at a grand piano, his fingers moving over the keys with the same precision he brought to everything else. The piece was something classical, Chopin maybe, but played with a melancholy that made Elena's throat tight. He played like someone who'd learned to express things through music that he'd never say out loud. She must have made some sound because Victor's hand stilled on the keys. He looked up and found her watching from the doorway. "I'm sorry," Elena said quickly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't." Victor stood, smoothing down his shirt. "I should have warned you. I play sometimes. At night. If it bothers you, I can—" "No," Elena interrupted. "It's beautiful. I didn't know you played." "There are a lot of things you don't know about me." He moved toward the door, and Elena realized she was still blocking his exit. She stepped back quickly, putting space between them. "There are a lot of things I don't know about you either." They stood in the hallway, two strangers bound by law, and a dead man's final wish, and Elena thought, "This is my life now. This strange, impossible arrangement is my life." "Good night, Elena," Victor said quietly. "Good night," she managed. She watched him walk back toward his own bedroom, somewhere else in this sprawling penthouse, and tried to imagine a future where any of this made sense. In her room, Elena finally let herself cry. For Marcus, for the life she'd left behind, for the terrifying uncertainty of what came next. But somewhere beneath the tears, buried under the fear and confusion, was something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The first week passed in a blur of careful politeness and deliberate distance. Elena woke each morning in her enormous bed, disoriented by the silence. No aunt banging on the door demanding she get up and make breakfast. No Patricia's cutting remarks drifting through thin walls. Just quiet, broken only by the distant hum of the city 20 floors below. She learned Victor's rhythms quickly, because survival had taught her to read the patterns of the people she lived with. He left the penthouse at precisely 7:30 each morning, his footsteps measured and deliberate in the hallway. He returned between 6 and 7 in the evening, always pausing in the doorway to his study before acknowledging her presence. They ate dinner together every night. That seemed to be the one non-negotiable rule of their arrangement. "You don't have to cook," Victor had said on the second evening, finding her awkwardly attempting to navigate his chef's kitchen. "Thomas prepares meals, that's his job." "I can't just— I should contribute something," Elena had protested weakly. Victor's expression had gone carefully blank. "You're not staff, Elena. You're my wife. Act like it." So she stopped trying to make herself useful in ways that felt familiar and started the uncomfortable work of simply existing in a space where she was allowed to take up room. The college acceptance letter arrived on Thursday, official and terrifying. Elena read it 3 times, her hands shaking, before she finally believed it was real. Classes started in 5 weeks. 5 weeks to prepare for a life she'd convinced herself was impossible. "There's an orientation next week," Victor said at dinner that night, not looking up from his wine. "For incoming students. You should attend." "How did you—" "I read the letter. It was on the kitchen counter." He cut into his steak with surgical precision. "You'll need a laptop. I've ordered one. It should arrive tomorrow." Elena set down her fork, frustration finally overriding her habitual deference. "Do you always just decide things? Without asking?" Victor looked up, and something almost like surprise crossed his face. "Yes." "Well, maybe you could try asking sometimes," Elena said, then immediately wanted to take it back. She wasn't supposed to make demands, wasn't supposed to cause problems. But Victor didn't look angry. If anything, he looked intrigued. "All right," he said slowly. "Would you like me to order you a laptop for school, Elena?" Yes. Thank you. But I could have picked one out myself. I'm not completely helpless." "I never said you were." Victor resumed eating, but she caught the ghost of something that might have been a smile. "Noted." It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. The following Tuesday, Victor informed her they had an engagement. A fundraiser, he said over breakfast, which Elena had started joining him for, despite the strangeness of it. For the Children's Hospital, black tie, this Saturday. Elena's stomach dropped. I've never been to anything like that. I don't know how to. You'll be fine, Victor interrupted. Just stay close to me and let me handle the talking. What if I say something wrong? What if people ask questions about us, about how we met? Then you tell them the truth. Well, Victor's voice was matter of fact. That you're Marcus Ward's cousin and we met at his funeral. That we married quickly because life is short and neither of us wanted to waste time. Elena stared at him. You want me to tell them we got married weeks after a funeral? It's not a lie. Victor stood, adjusting his cuffs. People will talk regardless of what we say. Let them. Their opinions are irrelevant. Easy for him to say. Victor Vale had built his entire reputation on being untouchable, unreachable, above the petty concerns of normal people. Elena was just the awkward girl who'd never learned to fit in anywhere. But she nodded anyway because what choice did she have? Saturday arrived too quickly. Elena spent the afternoon in a state of mounting panic, trying on and discarding half the dresses in her closet before finally settling on a floor-length navy gown that felt elegant without being too attention-seeking. She was attempting to figure out her hair when someone knocked on her bedroom door. "Come in," she called, expecting Victor. Instead, a woman in her 40s entered, carrying what looked like a professional makeup kit. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense air that immediately put Elena at ease. "Mrs. Vale, I'm Marie. Mr. Vale asked me to help you get ready this evening." "Oh, that's not necessary. Humor me," Marie said with a smile. "It's not every day I get to work with someone who has actual bone structure. Half the women at these events have had so much work done, they all look like the same person." Despite herself, Elena laughed. Marie worked efficiently, asking questions about Elena's comfort level with makeup and styling, without making her feel inadequate. By the time she was finished, Elena barely recognized her own reflection. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, her makeup subtle but somehow transformative. She looked sophisticated, confident, like someone who belonged at a society fundraiser, like someone who could actually be Victor Vale's wife. "You're beautiful," Marie said warmly. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Victor was waiting in the living room when Elena emerged, and the look on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. It was gone almost immediately, replaced by his usual careful neutrality, but she'd seen it. That flash of something heated and entirely human. "You look appropriate," he said, which was possibly the most Victor Vale compliment imaginable. "You look appropriate too," Elena shot back before she could stop herself. This time she definitely saw him smile. The fundraiser was held at the Grandview Hotel, in a ballroom that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Women in designer gowns clustered in groups, their jewelry catching the light like fireflies. Men in tuxedos moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of people who'd never questioned their right to be anywhere. Elena felt like an imposter the moment they walked in. "Breathe," Victor murmured, his hand settling at the small of her back. The touch was light, professional, but it anchored her anyway. "You belong here as much as any of them." "I really don't," Elena whispered back. "You're my wife. That makes you untouchable." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "And if anyone makes you feel otherwise, tell me. I'll handle it." There was something almost protective in the way he said it, and Elena found herself leaning slightly into his touch before she caught herself. They made their way through the crowd, Victor stopping occasionally to exchange brief greetings with various attendees. Elena noticed how people reacted to him, a mixture of respect and wariness, like he was a dangerous animal they were all pretending to have tamed. No one questioned his presence, no one dared. "Victor, there you are." A man in his 50s approached, hand extended, smile too wide to be genuine. "I was hoping you'd make it tonight, and this must be the new Mrs. Vale. I have to say, the rumors don't do you justice, my dear." Elena forced a smile, but Victor's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her back. "Elena, this is Richard Castellano. We have some business dealings together." The way Victor said business dealings made it sound vaguely threatening. "It's lovely to meet you," Elena managed. "The pleasure is entirely mine. I have to admit, I was surprised to hear Victor had gotten married. We all thought he was married to his work." Richard laughed at his own joke. You must be quite something special to have caught his attention. She is, Victor said flatly, before Elena could formulate a response. If you'll excuse us, Richard, we should greet the hosts. He guided Elena away before the other man could respond, and she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Thank you, she murmured. Don't thank me for getting you away from a shark, Victor replied. Richard Castellano would sell his own mother if the price was right. I do business with him because it's strategically necessary, not because I trust him. Elena glanced up at him, startled by the blunt admission. Do you trust anyone? Victor's expression went distant. I trusted Marcus. Past tense. Elena's chest tightened. They found their assigned table near the front of the ballroom. The other couples seated there greeted them with varying degrees of warmth and curiosity. Elena fielded questions about where she was from, how she and Victor had met, what she did for a living. She stuck to Victor's script as much as possible, but she could feel the weight of their judgment with every answer. She wasn't one of them. She didn't have the right pedigree, the right background, the right anything. And they knew it. So you're starting nursing school, one woman said, her tone suggesting Elena had announced plans to join the circus. How practical. I think it's admirable, another woman cut in, younger, with sharp eyes and a genuine smile. We need more people in healthcare who actually give a damn. I'm Sophia Chen, by the way. My husband and I run a chain of urgent care clinics. It's nice to meet you, Elena said gratefully. Don't let these vultures intimidate you, Sophia continued, ignoring the pointed looks from the other women. Half of them have never worked a day in their lives. At least you're doing something meaningful. Victor's hand found Elena's under the table, a brief squeeze that might have been approval or reassurance or both. Dinner was served, some kind of chicken that probably cost more per plate than Elena used to spend on groceries for a week. She picked at it, hyper-aware of every move she made, terrified of using the wrong fork or making some other unforgivable social error. You're doing fine, Victor said quietly, leaning close enough that his breath stirred her hair. Stop second-guessing everything. Easy for you to say, Elena whispered back. You were born knowing which fork to use. Well, I was born in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn with a father who drank himself to death before I was 10, Victor said, and Elena's head snapped toward him in shock. I learned which fork to use because I had to, just like you're learning now. Before she could respond, someone clinked a glass, calling for attention. The speeches were starting, thank yous and fundraising goals and emotional appeals for the children's hospital. Elena tried to focus, but her mind kept circling back to what Victor had just revealed. Brooklyn. Poverty. A dead father. Nothing in his current life suggested that kind of background. How much had he had to fight to get here? And how much had that fight cost him? The speeches ended and the dancing began. Elena watched couples move onto the floor with mounting dread, knowing what was coming. We should dance, Victor said, standing and offering his hand. It's expected. Elena's heart hammered. I don't really know how. I do. Follow my lead. His hand was warm and solid when she took it, and he guided her onto the dance floor with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything else. When he pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, Elena had to remind herself to breathe. Put your hand on my shoulder, Victor instructed softly. She did, feeling the solid muscle beneath his jacket, and let him lead her into a simple waltz. He was right. He did know what he was doing. His movements were precise, controlled, making it easy for her to follow even when she stumbled. Sorry, she muttered when she stepped on his foot for the 3rd time. Stop apologizing, Victor said. You're learning. That's allowed. They turned, and Elena caught sight of their reflection in one of the ballroom's mirrored walls. They looked like they belonged together, like they fit. It was a lie, but a convincing one. Why did you tell me that? She asked quietly. About Brooklyn. About your father. Victor's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Because you needed to hear it. Because you think everyone here was born into this world, and you're the only one who doesn't belong. But half these people are pretenders, Elena. They're just better at hiding it. And you? Are you a pretender? I'm whatever I need to be to survive. His hand tightened at her waist, just for a moment. Same as you. The song ended, but they didn't immediately separate. For a handful of seconds, they stood there in the middle of the dance floor, close enough that Elena could see the faint scar above Victor's left eyebrow, the way his pupils had dilated slightly in the dim lighting. Then someone bumped into them, breaking the moment, and Victor stepped back smoothly. "I need to speak with some people," he said. "Will you be all right on your own for a few minutes?" Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. She made her way back to the table, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and tried to look like she had any idea what she was doing. Sophia appeared at her elbow a moment later. "You two are quite the pair," she said, sipping her own drink. "I have to admit, I didn't see it coming. Victor's been the city's most eligible bachelor for years. I think half the women here had money on him dying alone. It was unexpected for both of us," Elena said carefully. "The best things usually are." Sophia studied her with an assessing look that wasn't unkind. "Can I give you some advice? Unsolicited and probably unwelcome?" "I don't think I can stop you." Sophia laughed. "Smart woman. Here it is. Don't let these people make you feel small. They're going to try. It's what they do. But you're a Vale now, whether you feel like it or not. That name carries weight. Use it." "I don't want to use anything," Elena said quietly. "I just want to exist without apologizing for it," Sophia finished. "Yeah, I remember that feeling. When I married David, his family acted like I was some kind of gold digger who'd tricked their precious son. Never mind that I had my own medical degree and my own money. I wasn't the right kind of Asian, apparently. Too loud, too ambitious, too everything." "What did you do?" "I stopped giving a damn what they thought and built my own empire. Now they call me at Christmas and pretend they always supported me." Sophia's smile was sharp. "The point is, you get to decide who you are, Elena, not them, not even Victor, though he seems like he's trying to help in his own emotionally constipated way." Elena choked on her champagne. "Sorry, was that too blunt?" Sophia didn't sound sorry at all. "I've been told I have a problem with boundaries." "No, I thank you. Really. Any time. Here's my card." Sophia pressed a business card into Elena's hand. "Call me if you ever want to grab coffee and talk about how exhausting it is to be married to powerful men who think communication is a sign of weakness." She swept away, leaving Elena with the card and the first genuine smile she'd felt all evening. The ride home was quiet. Victor stared out the window at the city lights, his expression unreadable. Elena studied his reflection in the glass and wondered what he was thinking. If he was relieved the evening was over. If he'd found her performance adequate. If he regretted this entire arrangement. "You did well tonight," Victor said suddenly, as if he'd heard her thoughts. "I barely said anything." "Exactly. You didn't try too hard. Didn't apologize for existing. That's better than 90% of the people in that room." He turned to look at her directly. "Sophia Chen gave you her card." It wasn't a question. "She was nice," Elena said. "She's perceptive and trustworthy, which is rare." Victor's gaze held hers. "If you want to build connections outside of my world, she'd be a good place to start." "I thought I was supposed to be part of your world." "You are, but you should have your own world too, your own friends, your own life. This arrangement shouldn't erase you." Elena wanted to ask if he truly believed that, but the car was pulling up to their building, and the moment slipped away. The penthouse felt too quiet after the noise and glitter of the fundraiser. Elena kicked off her heels in the entryway, expensive, beautiful torture devices, and padded barefoot toward her room. "Elena!" She turned. Victor had removed his jacket and tie, loosened the top buttons of his shirt. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. "Thank you," he said. "For tonight. I know it wasn't easy." "It's part of the arrangement," Elena replied, echoing his words from the courthouse. Something flashed across Victor's face. Disappointment, maybe, or frustration. "Right. The arrangement." He turned toward his study, and Elena felt an unexpected urge to call him back, to say something real, something honest, something that acknowledged the growing strangeness between them. But she didn't know what that would be or if she had the right to say it. So she went to her room and closed the door, and tried not to think about how Victor's hand had felt at her waist when they danced. The days developed a rhythm. Elena started attending the college orientation sessions, navigating the campus with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be around people who cared about learning. about building something meaningful. The other students in the nursing program were younger than her, but they were kind, welcoming her into study groups and lunch plans without the judgment she'd braced for. At home, and she was starting to think of the penthouse as home, which terrified her, things with Victor remained carefully cordial. They ate dinner together. They discussed neutral topics like her classes and his work, though he was vague about the details of what exactly he did all day. She suspected she didn't want to know, but there were moments, small cracks in the professional facade they'd both constructed, like the night she found him in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, staring at a cup of tea he'd apparently forgotten to drink. "Can't sleep?" she asked, pulling her robe tighter. Victor looked up, and she saw exhaustion written into every line of his face. "Occupational hazard. What you do keeps you up at night. What I am keeps me up at night." He said it simply, without self-pity, and Elena felt something in her chest twist. She moved to the counter, filled the kettle, pulled out another mug. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No?" "Okay." She made herself tea and sat across from him at the kitchen island, and they drank in silence. After a while, some of the tension left Victor's shoulders. "You don't push," he said eventually. "Most people push." "Would it help if I did?" "No." A pause. "But I appreciate that you don't." It became a pattern. Some nights Elena would hear him moving around the penthouse in the small hours and would find him in the kitchen or the piano room or standing by the windows looking out at the city. She'd make tea and sit with him, and they'd exist in the same space without demands or expectations. She started to understand that Victor was lonely, that for all his power and control, he lived in a kind of isolation she recognized because she'd lived there too. 2 weeks before classes started, Elena's aunt called. She stared at the number on her phone screen for a long moment before answering, dread pooling in her stomach. "Hello?" "Elena, finally, I've been trying to reach you for days." Judith's voice was sharp with accusation. "You haven't returned any of my calls." Because Elena had blocked most of their numbers, but apparently she'd missed this one. "I've been busy," Elena said. "What do you need?" "What do I—" "Elena, you disappeared. You married that man without a word to any of us, and now you can't even be bothered to check in with your family?" "You told me I was an embarrassment," Elena said quietly. "You told me I was selfish and ungrateful. Why would I call?" "Don't be dramatic. We were upset. Marcus had just died and you were making rash decisions. The decision has been made, Aunt Judith. I'm not changing my mind." There was a pause, and when Judith spoke again, her voice had changed, softer, almost pleading. "Elena, sweetheart, I'm worried about you. We all are. You barely know this man. What if he's not what he seems? What if you're in danger?" Something cold settled in Elena's chest. "I'm fine." "Are you? Really? Because Patricia told me she saw you at that fundraiser, and you looked terrified, like you were in over your head." Judith's concern sounded so genuine. Almost. "You can come home, you know. We'll figure something out. You don't have to stay in this marriage if you're unhappy." I'm not unhappy. Elena, I have to go. Please don't call again." She hung up before Judith could respond, but her hands were shaking. They didn't want her back out of concern. They wanted access to Victor's world, his money, his connections. She could see it so clearly now, the manipulation that had always been there, but that she'd been too desperate for belonging to recognize. "Everything all right?" Elena spun. Victor stood in the doorway to the living room, watching her with that too perceptive gaze. "My aunt called," Elena said, setting her phone down like it had burned her. "She wanted to, I don't know, check on me," she said, "but it felt like a fishing expedition," Victor finished, "to see if you'd give them an in." "How did you know?" "Because it's what people like that do. They sense weakness, and they exploit it." Victor moved closer, and Elena was struck again by how he could be so controlled and yet so present at the same time. "What did you tell her?" "That I'm fine, that I'm not changing my mind." "Good." He paused. "But are you?" "Fine, I mean." Elena almost laughed. "I don't know. Is anyone ever really fine?" "Fair point." Victor studied her for a moment longer, then seemed to come to some decision. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her to his study, a room she'd never actually entered before. It was exactly what she'd expected: dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk covered in paperwork. But there was also a wall of photographs she hadn't anticipated. Victor and Marcus as teenagers, arms thrown around each other's shoulders. Marcus grinning at the camera while Victor looked vaguely uncomfortable. The two of them at what looked like a college graduation. Marcus in a cap and gown, Victor in a suit that didn't quite fit. "He was my only friend," Victor said quietly, staring at the photos. "For a very long time, he was the only person who saw me as something other than a weapon or a threat. He believed I could be better than what I came from." Elena's throat tightened. "Did you believe it?" "Sometimes." Victor's jaw worked. "And then I'd do something that proved I was exactly what I came from, and he'd somehow convince me to try again anyway." He turned to face her. "I loved him, like a brother. And when he asked me to take care of you, I said yes because I owed him everything. But I also said yes because he made me promise I wouldn't let you disappear, that I wouldn't let your family erase you." "I'm not sure I can be unerased," Elena whispered. "You're wrong." Victor's voice was firm. "You're already different than you were 3 weeks ago. You stand straighter, you argue with me, you take up space without apologizing for it." He paused. Marcus would have been proud. The words broke something loose in Elena's chest, and before she could stop herself, she was crying. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd learned to hide, but real, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Victor went very still, and for a moment Elena thought he would leave, uncomfortable with her breakdown. Instead, he moved closer, and very carefully pulled her into an embrace that was probably meant to be awkward, but somehow wasn't. "I miss him," Elena choked out against Victor's shoulder. "I miss him," Elena choked out. "At least here. At least with me." They stood like that for a long time, Victor holding her while she cried for everything she'd lost and everything she was terrified of becoming. And when she finally pulled back, embarrassed and raw, he didn't let go immediately. "Better?" he asked. "I got tears all over your shirt." "I have others." His mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Are you better?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "But thank you for—" She gestured vaguely. "Whatever this was." "Letting you be human?" Victor suggested. "That's allowed too, Elena. You don't have to be perfect all the time." "Neither do you," she shot back, and was rewarded with that almost smile again. Later that night, Elena lay in bed and thought about how Victor's arms had felt around her. Solid, safe, real. She thought about the photographs on his wall and the grief he carried so carefully that most people probably never saw it. She thought about loneliness and isolation and two broken people trying to figure out how to exist in the same space. And she thought, dangerously, that maybe this arrangement was becoming something neither of them had planned for. Something that felt a lot like the beginning of trust. Trust, Elena discovered, was a peculiar thing. It didn't arrive all at once like in the movies, with swelling music and dramatic declarations. Instead, it accumulated in small moments, the way Victor started leaving her favorite tea on the counter in the mornings, or how she stopped flinching when he entered a room unexpectedly. It built itself in the spaces between their careful words, in the silences that had stopped feeling uncomfortable and started feeling like understanding. Classes began on a Tuesday that felt both momentous and terrifyingly ordinary. Elena stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what someone returning to school at 26 should wear, before finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater. Professional but not trying too hard. Confident but not presumptuous. She was gathering her new laptop and notebooks when Victor emerged from his study, coffee in hand. He paused, taking in her appearance with that assessing look she'd come to recognize. "First day," he said. It wasn't a question. "First day," Elena confirmed, trying to ignore the butterflies rioting in her stomach. "You'll be fine." Victor set down his coffee and crossed to where she stood. For a moment, Elena thought he might do something unexpected, touch her shoulder, offer some gesture of encouragement, but instead he simply handed her a sleek black card. "The driver will take you. James knows the campus. He'll wait and bring you home after." "I can take the subway," Elena protested automatically. "I don't need—" "You're my wife." Victor's voice was firm, but not unkind. "You don't take the subway. Not because I think you're incapable, but because it's unnecessary when we have perfectly good cars sitting unused in the garage. Elena wanted to argue, but she recognized the futility of it. This was one of those hills Victor had apparently decided to die on, and she was learning to pick her battles. Fine, she said, but I'm buying my own textbooks. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Victor's face. With the credit card I gave you? That's different. Is it? Victor picked up his coffee again, moving toward the door. Enjoy your first day, Elena. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong there. He left before she could formulate a response, and Elena stood in the empty penthouse wondering when exactly Victor's opinion of her had started to matter so much. The nursing program was everything she'd hoped and more. The professors were passionate, the curriculum challenging, and her fellow students were a mix of fresh-faced 20-year-olds and mature students like herself who'd taken winding paths to get here. Elena found herself gravitating toward a study group that included a former EMT named David, a single mother named Rachel, and a recent immigrant from Haiti named Marie-Claire, who had the sharpest clinical instincts Elena had ever witnessed. "So you're married to Victor Vale," Rachel said one afternoon, 3 weeks into the semester. They were sprawled across the student union, surrounded by anatomy textbooks and rapidly cooling coffee. Like, the actual Victor Vale. Elena's stomach clenched. She'd been waiting for this conversation, dreading it. How did you... Girl, you have the same last name and you got dropped off this morning in a car that costs more than my house. Rachel's expression was more curious than judgmental. Plus, David's cousin works security at the Grandview and saw you at that fundraiser last month. Word gets around. It's complicated, Elena said carefully. Isn't it always? Marie-Claire said in her accented English, looking up from her notes. My husband, he is complicated too. All men are complicated. It's whether they're worth the complication that matters. Is he? David asked, genuinely interested. Worth it, I mean? Elena thought about Victor playing piano at 2 a.m, about the photographs of Marcus in his study, about the way he'd held her while she cried and never once made her feel weak for breaking down. I think so, she said quietly. I'm still figuring it out. Well, at least he's hot, Rachel offered. I mean, if you're going to have a complicated marriage, might as well be with someone who looks like a villain from a romance novel. Despite herself, Elena laughed. Is that what he looks like? Oh, honey, you live with the man. You tell me. Elena thought about the scar above Victor's eyebrow, the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking through a problem, how his rare smiles transformed his entire face. I suppose he's objectively attractive. Objectively attractive, David repeated with a snort. That's the most repressed thing I've ever heard. Leave her alone, Marie-Claire scolded. Not everyone needs to broadcast their personal life. Elena, you do what feels right for you, yes? And if you need friends who won't judge, you have us. The simple kindness of it made Elena's throat tight. She'd spent so long believing friendship was something she had to earn through usefulness or self-erasure. The idea that people might just like her for herself felt revolutionary. Thank you, she managed. Really? That evening, she came home to find the penthouse dark, except for a single light in the kitchen. Victor sat at the island with what looked like a drink, whiskey, probably, and a stack of papers that had clearly been the subject of his brooding. Bad day? Elena asked, setting down her bag. Victor looked up, and she was struck by the exhaustion etched into his features. You could say that. Want to talk about it? No. He took a sip of his drink, then seemed to reconsider. A business deal fell through. Someone I trusted made a choice that will have consequences. For them or for you? Both. Victor's smile was sharp and entirely without humor. That's how these things work. Actions have repercussions. I just need to decide what those repercussions should be. There was something in his voice that made Elena's skin prickle with unease. She'd been living with Victor long enough to understand that his world operated by different rules than the one she'd known. That the business he conducted existed in shadows and moral gray areas she preferred not to examine too closely. But she also knew that whoever had betrayed him was probably terrified right now, and that Victor's version of consequences could be devastating. Can I ask you something? Elena said, moving to the refrigerator to pull out leftovers. And will you answer honestly? Depends on the question. Have you ever killed anyone? The silence that followed was so complete Elena could hear her own heartbeat. She turned to find Victor watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Yes," he said finally. "Does that change things?" Elena's hand stilled on the container of pasta. She should be horrified, should be running for the door, should be calling the police or a lawyer or anyone who could extract her from this increasingly surreal situation. Instead, she found herself asking, "Did they deserve it?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "Does anyone deserve death?" "I don't know. I'm asking you." He stood, moving around the island until he was close enough that Elena could see the faint lines of strain around his mouth. "The man who killed Marcus walked into a restaurant and shot him 3 times at point-blank range because someone paid him to do it. Marcus died before the ambulance arrived." Victor's voice was utterly calm, clinical, which somehow made it worse. 2 weeks later, that man walked into the harbor with 50 pounds of chain around his ankles. Did he deserve it? Elena's breath caught. I did." Victor didn't look away, didn't soften the admission. "I found him, and I gave him the choice to tell me who hired him or to die slowly. He chose slowly." A pause. "I still made him talk first. The smart thing would be to step back, to put distance between herself and this man who had just confessed to torture and murder with the same tone someone else might use to discuss the weather. But Elena didn't step back. Instead, she found herself asking, "Did you find out who hired him?" "Yes." "And?" "And they're no longer a problem." Victor tilted his head, studying her reaction. "You're not running, you're not screaming, you're not even particularly shocked. Why?" "Because I'm not stupid," Elena said quietly. "I've known what you were since before we got married. I've known that the money paying for my school, and the clothes in my closet, and the food in this kitchen comes from places I probably shouldn't ask about. I've known that the man Marcus loved like a brother was also the man people fear in the same breath they speak his name." She met his gaze steadily. "What I didn't know was whether you'd ever lie to me about it. And now you know I won't." "Now I know you won't," Elena confirmed. She turned back to the pasta, heating it in the microwave like they hadn't just had a conversation about murder. "Have you eaten?" Victor made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "You're remarkable, you know that?" "I'm practical," Elena corrected. "And you didn't answer my question." "No, I haven't eaten." "Then sit down. You look like you're about to fall over." He sat, and they ate reheated pasta in the kitchen while the city glittered outside the windows, and Elena wondered when exactly she'd made peace with the fact that her husband had blood on his hands. When she'd decided that the man who held her while she cried and paid for her education and protected her from her family's cruelty mattered more than the darkness he carried. Maybe it made her complicit. Maybe it made her just as morally compromised as he was. Or maybe it just made her human. The fundraiser invitation arrived in early October, embossed and elegant. Elena pulled it from the stack of mail and read it twice, her stomach sinking. "The Ward Foundation Annual Gala," she read aloud. Victor looked up from his laptop. "My aunt and uncle are hosting. They want both of us to attend." Victor's expression went carefully blank. "Do you want to go?" "No," Elena said immediately. Then, more honestly, "I don't know. Part of me wants to show them I'm fine, that I'm more than fine, that they didn't break me." "And the other part?" "The other part wants to pretend they don't exist and never think about them again." Victor closed his laptop with deliberate precision. "Here's what I think. I think you should go because hiding feels too much like shame, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. I think you should go because facing them now on your terms is better than running into them later when you're unprepared." He paused. "But ultimately, it's your choice. If you say no, we send our regrets and never mention it again." Elena looked down at the invitation, at her aunt's flowing signature at the bottom, and felt something shift in her chest. Victor was right. Running felt too much like the old Elena, the one who apologized for existing, the one who let her family treat her like an inconvenience. She wasn't that person anymore. "We'll go," she said, "but I need a favor." "Name it." "Help me pick out a dress that will make Patricia's head explode with jealousy." Victor's smile was slow and absolutely wicked. "That, Elena, would be my genuine pleasure." The dress they chose was a deep emerald green that brought out the color in Elena's eyes and fit like it had been designed specifically for her body, which it had, courtesy of a designer Victor apparently had on retainer. The back dipped low. The neckline was just shy of scandalous, and when Elena looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the confident woman staring back. "Perfect," Victor said from the doorway of her room, and something in his voice made Elena's skin flush with heat. "It's not too much?" "It's exactly enough." He moved closer, and Elena caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and subtle that she'd come to associate with safety. "You look like someone who knows exactly who she is and doesn't apologize for it." "I'm not sure that's true," Elena admitted. "Then fake it." Victor's hand came up to adjust a strand of hair that had escaped her updo, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. "Confidence is just another kind of armor. Wear it until it becomes real." The gala was held at the Ward family estate, a sprawling property in Westchester that Elena had visited exactly twice. Once for Christmas when she was 15, and once for Marcus's wake. Both times, she'd felt like an intruder in someone else's story. Tonight, arriving on Victor's arm with her head held high, she felt different. The ballroom was already crowded when they arrived, filled with the same kind of people who'd attended the hospital fundraiser. Old money, new money, people who'd clawed their way to the top, and people who'd been born there. Elena recognized several Ward relatives scattered throughout the crowd, their eyes tracking her progress with obvious shock. "Mrs. Vale, how lovely to see you again." Elena turned to find Sophia Chen approaching, resplendent in a red gown that looked like liquid fire. "Sophia, hi, you look amazing." "So do you. That dress is a statement." Sophia's eyes gleamed with approval. "And judging by the looks you're getting, everyone's receiving the message loud and clear." "What message is that?" "That you're not the scared little mouse they remember. That you belong here just as much as any of them." Sophia glanced at Victor. "He's good for you. You're standing taller." Before Elena could respond, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Elena, there you are." Aunt Judith descended on them, all false warmth and calculating eyes. She was dressed in an expensive gown that couldn't quite hide the strain around her mouth. "We were beginning to think you wouldn't come. And Victor, of course. So generous of you to support our little foundation." "It's hardly little," Victor said coolly. "The Ward Foundation manages over 20 million in assets. That's quite impressive." Judith's smile tightened. "Marcus worked very hard to build it. We're trying to honor his legacy. By hosting galas in his name while his actual wishes go ignored." Victor's voice was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "Interesting approach." The color drained from Judith's face. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "I'm sure you do." Victor's hand settled at Elena's waist, possessive and protective. "Marcus wanted Elena taken care of. He wanted her to have opportunities, education, a real future. Instead, you charged her rent for a closet and made her feel grateful for it. Now see here." "No, you see here." Victor's voice dropped, quiet and absolutely lethal. "Elena is my wife. That makes her untouchable. If you or anyone in this family makes her feel small, if you even look at her the wrong way, I will systematically dismantle everything you've built. Your foundation, your husband's business, your daughter's social standing, all of it. Do I make myself clear?" Judith had gone white. She opened her mouth, closed it, then managed a jerky nod before retreating into the crowd like a scolded child. Elena stared at Victor, her heart pounding. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He looked down at her, his expression softening slightly. "And I'd do it again." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena fielded questions from distant relatives who suddenly remembered she existed, accepted congratulations on her marriage from people who'd never spoken to her before, and watched as Victor systematically intimidated anyone who even thought about being condescending. It should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like vindication. Patricia found her near the end of the night, cornering her by the bar with a glass of wine clutched too tightly in one hand. "You must be so pleased with yourself," Patricia hissed. "Trapping someone like Victor Vale. Do you really think he'll stay once the novelty wears off? Once he realizes you're still just the same pathetic girl who couldn't even finish college the first time?" The old Elena would have absorbed those words like poison. would have internalized every cruel syllable and carried them like stones in her chest. But Elena wasn't that girl anymore. You know what, Patricia? Elena's voice was calm, almost conversational. I used to think there was something wrong with me, that there was some fundamental defect that made me unlovable, forgettable, less than everyone else. I let you and your mother convince me that being kind was weakness, that needing help was shameful, that wanting more than scraps was selfish. Patricia's eyes narrowed. I have no idea what you're... But I figured something out, Elena continued. The problem was never me. It was you. All of you. You needed someone to look down on, someone to make yourselves feel superior, and I was convenient. But I'm not convenient anymore. She stepped closer, holding Patricia's gaze. I'm Victor Vale's wife. I'm a nursing student with a 4.0 GPA. I have friends who actually like me and a future that doesn't involve begging for scraps from people who treated me like garbage. So no, Patricia, I'm not the same pathetic girl, and you're going to have to find someone else to torture because I'm done. Patricia's face had gone through several colors during this speech, finally settling on a mottled red. You self-righteous little... Is there a problem here? Victor materialized at Elena's elbow, his presence like a physical force. Patricia took an involuntary step backward. No, she managed. No problem. Good. Victor's smile was all teeth. Because if there were a problem, I'd have to address it. And neither of us wants that. Patricia fled. Elena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and realized she was shaking, not with fear or upset, but with adrenaline and something that felt dangerously close to triumph. You heard all of that? She said to Victor. Every word. His hand found hers, squeezed gently. You were magnificent. I was mean. You were honest. There's a difference. Victor studied her face. How do you feel? Elena considered the question. Like I just climbed a mountain, like I can breathe for the first time in years, like... She stopped, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions. Like I'm free. Good. Victor's voice was soft. That's exactly how you should feel. They left shortly after, stepping out into the cool October night. Elena stood on the steps of her aunt's estate, a place that had never felt like home, and realized she didn't ever need to come back here. She'd faced them, proven to herself that she could, and now she could let them fade into irrelevance. Thank you, she said to Victor as James pulled the car around. For what? For defending me. For believing I was worth defending. Elena turned to face him, and in the dim light from the estate, she could see the way his eyes had softened. For keeping your promise to Marcus. Elena. Victor stopped, seemed to struggle with something. I should tell you something. What? The car pulled up before he could answer, and the moment broke. Victor helped her inside, and they rode home in silence, but Elena could feel the weight of whatever he'd almost said hanging between them. Back at the penthouse, Elena kicked off her heels and was about to retreat to her room when Victor caught her hand. Wait, he said. Please. She waited. Victor looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, very carefully, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, achingly tender, and entirely unexpected. What I meant to say, Victor said quietly, is that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Marcus. Stopped being about a promise I made to a dying man. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. You've become more than an obligation, Elena. You've become... He stopped, jaw tightening. I don't know what to call it, but it's more. Elena's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. More, she repeated. More, Victor confirmed. He released her hand, stepped back. I'm not good at this, at feelings, at connection, at any of it. But I needed you to know that you matter. Not because of Marcus, but because you're you. He turned and walked toward his room before Elena could formulate a response, leaving her standing in the entryway with her heart in her throat and the ghost of his kiss still burning on her skin. She went to her room in a daze, changed out of the emerald dress with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, and lay awake for hours trying to process what had just happened. Victor Vale, the man who controlled an empire through fear and calculated violence, had just admitted that she mattered to him, that she'd become more than a duty, more than a promise. And the terrifying part, the part that kept Elena awake as the city lights painted patterns on her ceiling, was that she felt the same way. Somewhere between the courthouse wedding and the midnight tea and the quiet dinners, and the way he'd held her while she cried, Victor had stopped being the monster from the stories. He'd become a person, complex, damaged, dangerous, but also capable of tenderness and loyalty and a kind of protective fierceness that made Elena feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. She was falling for him. Maybe she'd been falling for him since that first night, when he'd played Chopin in the dark and let her glimpse the loneliness beneath his armor. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt inevitable, like the conclusion to an equation she'd been solving since the moment she signed her name in that courthouse. Elena Ward, Elena Vale now, had married a stranger to fulfill a dead man's wish. But somewhere along the way, that stranger had become the person she trusted most in the world. And if the way he'd looked at her tonight was any indication, she wasn't the only one who'd been caught off guard by this thing growing between them. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and full of dreams where Victor's hand found hers in the dark and didn't let go. The morning after the gala, Elena woke to silence and the memory of Victor's lips against her knuckles. She lay in bed for longer than necessary, replaying his words, trying to decode what they meant. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Marcus. You've become more. More than what? More than an obligation? More than a promise kept? Or something deeper, something neither of them had planned for? She finally dragged herself out of bed and found the penthouse empty except for a note on the kitchen counter in Victor's precise handwriting. Had to leave early for business in Boston. Back late tonight. Your midterm results were delivered. They're on your desk. Elena's heart jumped. She'd almost forgotten about the anatomy midterm she'd taken last week, too consumed with preparing for the gala to obsess over her performance. She hurried to her room and found the envelope exactly where Victor said it would be. 98%. She stared at the number, at the professor's comments praising her detailed answers and clinical thinking, and felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had told her she was good at something? That she'd exceeded expectations rather than merely scraped by? She took a photo of the results and sent it to Victor before she could second-guess herself. His response came 15 minutes later. Told you that you belonged there. Proud of you. 3 simple sentences that made Elena's chest feel too full. She read them 5 times before setting her phone down and trying to focus on the anatomy homework that was due Monday. The apartment felt too large and too quiet without Victor's presence. Elena had grown accustomed to the rhythm of him, his footsteps in the hallway, the sound of him working in his study, the occasional drift of piano music late at night. Without those familiar markers, the space felt hollow. She spent the day studying, broke for a simple lunch, then found herself drawn to Victor's study. She'd been inside before, but always with him present. Standing in the doorway now felt like trespassing. Still, she stepped inside. The photographs of Marcus still dominated one wall, frozen moments of a friendship that had shaped both men. Elena moved closer, studying the images she'd only glimpsed before. There was one of Marcus and Victor at what looked like a high school football game, both of them muddy and grinning, arms slung around each other's shoulders. Another showed them older, dressed in suits, flanking a woman Elena didn't recognize, beautiful, with dark hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Who was she? Elena wondered aloud. Her phone rang, startling her. Sophia Chen's name flashed across the screen. Hey, Elena answered. What's up? Coffee, Sophia said without preamble. I'm going stir-crazy working from home and need human interaction. There's a place 2 blocks from your building. Can you meet me in 20 minutes? Elena glanced around the empty penthouse. Yeah, I can do that. Excellent. See you soon. The coffee shop was small and unpretentious, the kind of place that felt worlds away from the marble and gold of Elena's new life. Sophia was already seated when Elena arrived, 2 lattes waiting on the table. You look different, Sophia said as Elena sat down. Good different, like you actually slept last night. I did eventually. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Thank you for this. I was going a little crazy alone in the apartment. Where's your terrifyingly attractive husband? Boston. Business. Sophia's eyes gleamed with interest. And he left you alone? That's progress. Early in my marriage, David was convinced I'd disappear if he blinked too long. Men with control issues and their wives, I swear. Victor doesn't have control issues, Elena said automatically, then stopped. Okay, he absolutely has control issues, but he's trying. They all try, Sophia said. The question is whether they're trying for themselves or for you. David had to learn I wasn't a possession to be managed. Sounds like Victor's learning the same lesson. Elena thought about Victor defending her at the gala, about his admission that she'd become more than a promise. I think he might be. Good. Sophia took a sip of her latte. Now, real talk. You stood up to your cousin last night. I heard about it from 3 different people. How does that feel? Terrifying, Elena admitted. Liberating, both at once. That's normal. The first time you stop letting people walk all over you, it feels like you've committed some kind of crime, like you violated some unspoken rule about being nice. Sophia leaned forward. But here's the thing. Being nice and being a doormat are not the same thing. You get to have boundaries. You get to demand respect. And anyone who makes you feel guilty for that doesn't deserve space in your life. When did you learn that? The hard way, multiple times, with therapy. Sophia's expression turned serious. Look, I know we haven't known each other long, but I recognize a kindred spirit when I see one. You've been told your whole life that you're too much or not enough, and you've internalized that garbage. But the woman I saw last night, she was exactly right, and I think you're starting to believe that too. Elena's throat tightened. I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. Try, fail, try again. Sophia pulled out her phone. Speaking of trying, I'm organizing a fundraiser for a free clinic in Queens. Nothing fancy, just a silent auction and dinner. Would you and Victor be interested in attending? I'd have to ask him, but yes, I think so. What's the clinic for? Undocumented immigrants, working poor, anyone who falls through the cracks of the system. Sophia's eyes were bright with passion. We provide basic care, vaccinations, prenatal support, mental health services, all free or sliding scale. It's my favorite project. It sounds incredible. It is, and exhausting, and never-ending, but it matters. Sophia studied Elena thoughtfully. You know, once you finish your nursing degree, if you're interested, we could use good people. Just putting that out there. The idea settled into Elena's chest like a seed. A future where she actually helped people, where her work had meaning beyond a paycheck. She dreamed of it once, before life and her family had ground those dreams to dust. I'll think about it, Elena said. Seriously. They talked for another hour, about school and marriage, and the strange experience of building a life that didn't resemble anything you'd imagined for yourself. When Elena finally left, she felt lighter, more anchored, like maybe she was learning to exist in the world as herself, rather than as an apology. Victor returned just after 11 that night. Elena was curled up on the living room couch with her anatomy textbook when she heard his key in the lock. She looked up as he entered, and her breath caught at the sight of him. He looked exhausted, not just tired, but hollowed out, like whatever business he'd conducted in Boston had cost him something essential. His tie was loosened, his jacket slung over one arm, and there was a tightness around his eyes she'd learned to recognize as pain. Hey, she said softly. Rough day? Victor's gaze found hers, and something in his expression shifted, softened. You could say that. Have you eaten? No. Elena stood, marking her place in the textbook. Come on, I'll make you something. Elena, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She moved toward the kitchen, and after a moment, Victor followed. She assembled a simple meal from the leftovers in the refrigerator, Thomas's chicken, rice, vegetables, and heated it while Victor sat at the island, watching her with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every movement. How was Boston? She asked, setting the plate in front of him. Complicated. Victor picked up his fork, then set it down again. A situation I'd hoped to resolve peacefully required less peaceful methods. Elena's stomach clenched, but she kept her voice steady. Is everyone okay? Define okay. Victor's smile was bitter. No one died, if that's what you're asking. But there are consequences coming. There are always consequences. He started eating, and Elena poured them both water, trying to figure out what to say. She'd learned that Victor didn't always want solutions when he was like this. Sometimes he just needed to sit with the weight of what he'd done until he could compartmentalize it enough to function. I got my midterm results, she said finally. 98%. Victor looked up, and the pride in his eyes was immediate and genuine. That's exceptional, Elena. I sent you a photo. I know. I've looked at it approximately 15 times today. He took another bite of food. Your professor's comments were glowing. She said you have natural clinical instincts. You read the comments? Of course I did. Victor's expression was almost puzzled, like the question didn't make sense. You're brilliant. Why wouldn't I want to read about it? Elena felt heat creep up her neck. I'm not brilliant. I just studied hard. Intelligence isn't just raw knowledge, Elena. It's how you apply it, how you think through problems, how you connect disparate pieces of information into coherent understanding. Victor set down his fork. You are absolutely brilliant. Don't diminish that. They stared at each other across the kitchen island, and Elena felt the air between them thicken with something unspoken. This was becoming familiar, these moments where the careful distance they maintained threatened to collapse entirely. I had coffee with Sophia today, Elena said, needing to break the tension. She invited us to a fundraiser for a clinic she runs. When? 3 weeks. It's not fancy, just a small event. Then we'll go. Victor resumed eating. I've been meaning to donate to her organization anyway. Their work is important. She mentioned that I could work there after I graduate. If I wanted to. Victor went very still. Do you want to? Maybe. I don't know yet. It's a long time away. Elena wrapped her hands around her water glass. But it felt good to think about the future like that, like I actually have one. You do? Victor's voice was firm. You have whatever future you want, Elena. If that's working with Sophia, if it's something else entirely, it's yours to choose. What about you? The question slipped out before Elena could stop it. What's your future? Victor's jaw tightened. That's more complicated. Why? Because my choices have never been just about me. Because there are obligations and expectations and debts that need to be repaid. He pushed his empty plate away. Because I built my life on violence and control, and I'm not sure there's a version of the future where I get to walk away from that clean. Elena moved around the island, drawn by something she couldn't name. She stopped beside Victor's chair, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the way his shoulders carried tension like armor. What if you didn't have to walk away clean? She asked quietly. What if you just had to walk away? Victor looked up at her, and the expression on his face was so raw it made her chest ache. It's not that simple. I know. Elena surprised herself by reaching out, by letting her hand rest on his shoulder. But maybe it could be. Eventually. Victor's hand came up to cover hers, his touch warm and solid. You're an optimist. I'm realistic. There's a difference. Elena's thumb traced a small circle against his shoulder. You've spent your whole life fighting. Maybe you're allowed to stop fighting. Maybe you're allowed to just live. And if I don't know how to do that, then you learn. We both do. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. Together. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Together implied a future that extended beyond their one-year agreement. Together implied partnership, trust, something that looked dangerously like permanence. Victor stood abruptly, and for a moment Elena thought she'd pushed too far. But instead of pulling away, he turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that stole her breath. Elena, he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a confession. I'm not good at this. At any of this. At wanting someone. At needing someone. At imagining a future that doesn't end in fire. Then imagine something different, Elena whispered. Imagine this. She didn't know which of them closed the distance first. It didn't matter. What mattered was Victor's mouth on hers, careful at first, almost tentative, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he held on too tight. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying at once. Victor's control fractured. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her head back as he kissed her with a desperation that matched the pounding of her own heart. Elena pressed against him, drowning in the taste of him, the feel of his body solid and real against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena felt like the world had tilted on its axis. This complicates things, Victor said, his forehead resting against hers. I know. We should talk about it, about what it means. I know. Elena's hands were still fisted in his shirt. Do you want to talk about it now? Victor's laugh was rough. No. Good. Elena pulled him back down, and this time when they kissed, there was no hesitation, no careful distance, just heat and need and the relief of finally admitting what had been building between them for months. They ended up on the couch in Victor's study, Elena half in his lap, her careful updo destroyed by Victor's hands, his tie discarded somewhere on the floor. They kissed until Elena's lips felt swollen, until Victor's careful control had completely unraveled, until the possibility of stopping felt impossible. We should slow down, Victor managed between kisses. You should think about this. Make sure it's what you want. I am sure. Elena nipped at his lower lip. Are you? Victor's response was to kiss her so thoroughly that Elena forgot her own name. When they finally separated, forced apart by the need to actually breathe, Elena found herself studying Victor's face. His hair was disheveled from her hands, his lips kiss-swollen, his careful composure completely shattered. He looked younger like this, more human, more hers. I should tell you something, Victor said, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Before this goes any further. Elena's stomach clenched with anxiety. Okay. The woman in the photograph, in my study, Marcus's sister Caroline. Victor's voice was steady but careful. We were engaged once, a long time ago. Elena went still. What happened? She died. Car accident, 6 years ago. Victor's eyes were dark with old pain. Marcus blamed himself. He was driving, walked away without a scratch while his sister died before the paramedics arrived. That's why you were so close, Elena said, pieces clicking into place. Why you owed him everything. He saved my life when we were 17, talked me out of making choices that would have ended me, gave me a reason to believe I could be something other than my father's son. Victor's hands tightened on Elena's waist. And I couldn't save his sister, couldn't protect her, couldn't even make him see that it wasn't his fault. Is that why he never told me he was sick? Because he didn't want anyone else to try to save him? Probably. Victor's voice cracked slightly. Marcus spent 6 years punishing himself for surviving. When the cancer diagnosis came, I think part of him was almost relieved. Elena's eyes stung with tears. That's heartbreaking. It is. Victor pulled her closer, burying his face against her neck. But his last thoughts were about making sure you'd be okay, about giving you the life his sister never got to have. That meant something to him. You meant something to him. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other, grieving together in a way they hadn't allowed themselves before. Elena cried for Marcus, for the life he'd lost too soon, for the guilt that had eaten him alive. Victor held her through it, his own grief a silent weight she could feel in the tension of his body. I'm sorry I didn't tell you before, Victor said eventually. About Caroline, about what she meant to me. You don't owe me your history, Elena said, pulling back enough to see his face. But I'm glad you told me. There's more. Victor's expression was conflicted. Things about my work, about the choices I've made, about the people I've hurt. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be together in any real sense, you should know all of it. Do I need to know everything right now? This second? Victor considered this. No. Then tell me when you're ready. Tell me when it feels right. Elena cupped his face in her hands. I'm not going anywhere, Victor. You don't have to earn my trust by confessing every sin. You just have to be honest with me going forward. I can do that, Victor said quietly. I want to do that. They kissed again, softer this time, with a tenderness that made Elena's chest ache. When Victor finally carried her to his bedroom, to their bedroom, she supposed, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They undressed each other slowly, trading kisses and whispered words, learning the geography of each other's bodies with careful hands. Victor was reverent, almost worshipful, like Elena was something precious he was afraid to break. She showed him with her hands and her mouth that she was stronger than he thought, that she could handle his intensity, that she wanted all of him, the violence and the tenderness, the control, and the surrender. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Victor's enormous bed, Elena's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to something approaching normal. "This changes things," Victor said into the darkness. "I know. We should probably discuss what it means. Set boundaries, establish expectations." Elena lifted her head to look at him. "Victor, can we please just exist in this moment without overthinking it? Can we please just be two people who care about each other without turning it into a negotiation?" Victor's lips curved in a small smile. "You're asking me to ignore my every instinct. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust this." Elena laid her head back down on his chest. "We'll figure out the details later. Right now I just want to sleep here. With you. Is that okay?" Victor's arms tightened around her. "That's more than okay." Elena drifted off to the sound of Victor's breathing, feeling safer and more at peace than she had in years, maybe ever. She woke to early morning light filtering through the curtains and Victor's hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. For a moment, she just lay there, savoring the novelty of waking up beside another person, of being touched with tenderness rather than obligation. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning?" Victor's voice was rough with sleep. "How do you feel?" Elena considered the question. Her body ached in unfamiliar places. Her heart felt too full. Her mind was already spinning with implications and uncertainties about what came next. "Happy," she said, surprising herself with the simplicity of it. "I feel happy." Victor's hand stilled on her back. Then he turned, pulling her fully against him, and kissed her with a thoroughness that suggested he felt the same way. They made love again in the morning light, slower this time, savoring each touch and kiss. Elena felt herself falling deeper with every whispered word, every careful caress, every moment that Victor let his guard down enough to show her the man beneath the armor. This was dangerous, she knew. Falling for someone who lived the way Victor did, who had enemies and secrets and blood on his hands. Falling for someone when the original terms of their arrangement had an expiration date. But as Victor pulled her close and held her like she was the most valuable thing in his world, Elena decided she didn't care about the danger. She'd spent too long playing it safe, making herself small, accepting scraps. This, whatever this was becoming, felt like finally learning to want something for herself. And she was done apologizing for that. They eventually made it to the kitchen for breakfast, both slightly disheveled and unable to stop touching each other in small ways. Victor's hand at her waist as he reached past her for coffee. Elena's fingers trailing across his shoulders as she moved around the island. "We're being ridiculous," Victor said, but he was smiling as he said it. "Completely ridiculous," Elena agreed. "I kind of love it." Victor caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "Elena, I need you to understand something. Last night, this morning, it wasn't casual for me. I don't do casual. I know. I mean it. If we're doing this, I need—" He stopped, jaw working. "I need you to stay, not just until the year is up. Stay because you want to, because this is real." Elena's breath caught. "Victor, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's a lot. I know I'm asking for more than we agreed to. But you should know where I stand. You should know that what started as a promise to Marcus became something else entirely, something I don't want to lose." Elena stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't yet say into the press of her lips against his. When she pulled back, Victor's eyes were dark with emotion. "Ask me again in a few months," she said softly, "when we've both had time to sit with this. When we're sure it's not just anything," Victor interrupted. "But I understand. Take the time you need." They spent the rest of the morning in comfortable domesticity, reading the paper and making plans for the week ahead. It felt surreal, this sudden shift from careful cohabitation to something that looked disturbingly like a real marriage. But Elena found herself settling into it with surprising ease. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Study group tomorrow at 2. David's bringing snacks. Marie Claire's bringing her color-coded notes. I'm bringing my sparkling personality. You in?" Elena smiled and typed back. "I'm in." "Study group?" Victor asked, reading over her shoulder. "Tomorrow afternoon. Is that okay?" Victor gave her a look. "Elena, you don't need my permission to see your friends. You never did." I know, She stopped herself. Old habits. Asking permission, seeking approval, making sure she wasn't inconveniencing anyone. Right. Sorry. Don't apologize either. Victor's expression was gentle. This is your life, Elena. Live it. She kissed him again because she could, because he was hers in a way she was still learning to believe, and went to prepare for another week of classes and studying and building the future she'd once thought was impossible. But as she gathered her books and notes, Elena's phone rang with an unknown number. Something cold settled in her stomach as she answered. Hello? Elena Vale? A woman's voice, professional and unfamiliar. Yes, this is she. My name is Detective Sarah Martinez. I'm with the Organized Crime Division. I was hoping we could meet to discuss your husband. Elena's blood went cold. What is this about? I'd rather discuss it in person. Would you be available to come down to the station tomorrow afternoon? Elena's mind raced. She should tell Victor. She should ask what this was about. She should demand a lawyer. Instead, she heard herself say, What time? 2:00. Ask for me at the front desk. The line went dead. Elena stood frozen in her bedroom, phone clutched in her trembling hand, and realized that falling for Victor Vale meant falling into his world completely, including the parts she'd been trying very hard not to think about, the parts that involved police investigations and organized crime, and all the darkness he'd tried to shield her from. She had a choice to make. Tell Victor about the detective's call and let him handle it, or go to that meeting and finally understand exactly what kind of man she'd given her heart to. Elena looked at her reflection in the mirror, at the woman she was becoming, and made her decision. Tomorrow at 2:00, she would go to the police station. She would hear what Detective Martinez had to say, and then she would decide what to do with that information, because she was done being protected from the truth, done being kept in the dark. If she was going to stay with Victor, if she was going to build a real life with him, she needed to know everything, even if it destroyed her. Elena didn't sleep well that night, despite Victor's arms around her and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Detective Martinez's voice asking her to come to the station, saw the careful way Victor had described his world as something built on violence and control. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would go to the meeting, but she would also tell Victor about it first. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed for the day in one of his immaculate suits, reading something on his phone with a frown that suggested bad news. Victor, she said, and something in her voice made him look up immediately, his entire focus shifting to her. I need to tell you something. His expression went carefully neutral, the way it did when he was bracing for impact. All right? I got a call yesterday from a Detective Martinez, Organized Crime Division. She wants to meet with me today at 2:00. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor set down his phone with deliberate precision, his jaw tight. What did you tell her? His voice was dangerously calm. That I'd be there. Elena, don't. She held up a hand. Don't tell me I shouldn't go. Don't tell me you'll handle it. Don't protect me from this. Victor's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger or fear or both. Do you have any idea what you're walking into? What they'll try to do? No, I don't. That's why I'm going. Elena moved closer, needing him to understand. You told me last night that if we're going to be together, I should know all of it. Well, this is me trying to know. This is me choosing to understand your world instead of hiding from it. My world could destroy you, Victor said quietly. It destroys everything it touches. Then maybe it's time to build a different world. Elena reached for his hand. Come with me. We'll go together. Victor stared at her like she'd suggested they walk into a burning building. You want me to come with you to a police interrogation? I want us to face this together. Whatever it is. Elena squeezed his hand. Unless you don't trust me to handle it. That's not... Victor stopped, his free hand coming up to rake through his hair in a rare gesture of agitation. I trust you, Elena. I'm not sure I trust them not to hurt you to get to me. Then come with me. Protect me if you need to, but let me hear what they have to say. Victor studied her for a long moment, something like awe crossing his features. You're serious? Completely. All right. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. We don't say a word without him present. Yet 2 hours later, Elena sat in a sterile interrogation room at the police station, Victor on one side and a sharp-eyed attorney named Michael Chen on the other. Detective Martinez sat across from them, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and the kind of patience that came from years of dealing with criminals who thought they were smarter than her. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Vale," Martinez said, her gaze flicking between Elena and Victor. "And Mr. Vale, I wasn't expecting you. My wife goes nowhere without representation," Victor said evenly. "Now what is this about?" Martinez pulled out a folder, spreading photographs across the table. Elena's stomach clenched as she recognized the images. Victor entering various buildings, meeting with men whose faces looked hard and dangerous, standing outside locations that screamed illegal operations. "We've been investigating your husband's organization for 3 years," Martinez said, watching Elena's reaction. "Money laundering, racketeering, extortion, smuggling. We have evidence tying him to at least a dozen criminal enterprises." "Then arrest him," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Why am I here?" "Because you're the weak point." Martinez leaned forward. "You married Victor Vale 6 months ago in what appears to be a business arrangement. You live in his home, spend his money, attend events on his arm. That makes you an accessory to his crimes. Unless, of course, you're willing to cooperate." Elena's blood ran cold. "Cooperate how?" "Don't answer that," Michael cut in sharply. "Detective, if you're threatening my client with charges you can't prove, this conversation is over." "I can prove plenty," Martinez said, "but I'm not interested in destroying Mrs. Vale's life. I'm interested in bringing down the organization that's been poisoning this city for decades." She turned back to Elena. "Help us. Tell us what you know about his operations, his associates, his business dealings. Testify against him, and I'll make sure you walk away from this clean." Elena felt Victor go absolutely still beside her. She didn't need to look at him to know what he was thinking, that he'd always known his world would eventually come for her, that he'd failed to protect her, that this was exactly what he'd feared. "Let me make sure I understand," Elena said slowly. "You want me to betray my husband, to testify against him in exchange for immunity from charges you may or may not be able to prove." "I'm offering you a way out," Martinez said. "A chance at a normal life. Unless you're telling me you're comfortable being married to a man who's killed people, who's ruined lives." Elena thought about Marcus's murderer walking into the harbor with chains around his ankles, about Victor's admission that he'd made the man talk before he died, about all the violence and darkness that lived beneath Victor's carefully controlled surface. Then she thought about Victor holding her while she cried, about him paying for her education without asking for anything in return, about the way he looked at her like she was the most valuable thing in his world, about the photographs of Marcus in his study and the grief he carried so carefully that most people never saw it. "I'd like to speak to my husband alone," Elena said. Martinez's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Vale, 5 minutes, in private, or this conversation is over and we walk out of here right now." Martinez looked like she wanted to argue, but Michael was already standing. "My clients have a right to confer. 5 minutes, detective." Martinez and Michael stepped out, leaving Elena and Victor alone in the interrogation room. Elena was acutely aware of the cameras in the corners, the microphones that were probably still recording despite the pretense of privacy. "You should take the deal," Victor said quietly. Elena's head snapped toward him. "What?" "You should cooperate. Give them what they want. Walk away from this." Victor's expression was carefully blank, but Elena could see the pain beneath it. "I knew this day would come eventually. I hoped we'd have more time. Are you seriously telling me to testify against you?" "I'm telling you to save yourself." Victor's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. "You have a future, Elena. A real one. Don't sacrifice it for me." Elena stared at him, at this man who'd spent months showing her she was worth something, who'd defended her against her family, who'd given her the tools to build the life she'd always wanted. This man who was now offering to let her destroy him if it meant she'd be safe. "Do you remember what you asked me last night?" Elena said softly. "You asked me to stay. Not just until the year was up, but to stay because this is real. Because you didn't want to lose this." "Elena, did you mean it?" Victor's jaw worked. "You know I did." Then you must be out of your mind if you think I'm going to sit in front of that detective and give her ammunition to take you away from me. Elena leaned closer, her voice fierce. I don't care what you've done, Victor. I don't care what evidence they have or what charges they want to file. I chose you. I chose this. And I'm not backing down now because it got complicated. You don't know what you're saying, Victor said, but his hand tightened on hers. You don't know what they could do to you. Then protect me. Fight for us. But don't ask me to betray you. Don't ask me to give up the first real thing I've ever had because you're afraid. Victor's eyes were dark with emotion. I'm terrified of losing you, of dragging you down with me, of watching everything I've built destroy the one good thing in my life. Then let's make sure that doesn't happen. Elena glanced at the camera in the corner. Do they have enough to actually charge you, or is this just fishing? It's fishing. They've been trying to build a case for years, but I'm careful. My legitimate businesses are clean, and anything else, he paused. They can't prove it. Not without testimony from someone on the inside. Someone like me. Yes. Elena took a deep breath, then stood. Then let's go tell Detective Martinez she's wasting her time. Victor stared at her like she was an answer to a question he hadn't known how to ask. Then he stood too, pulling her into his arms, right there in the interrogation room, cameras be damned. Are you sure? He whispered against her hair. I've never been more sure of anything. When Martinez and Michael returned, they found Elena and Victor standing side by side, united. I'm not interested in your deal, Elena said before Martinez could speak. I have nothing to tell you about my husband's business because I don't involve myself in his business. We keep those parts of our lives separate. Mrs. Vale, you need to think very carefully. I have. My answer is no. Elena kept her voice steady, channeling every ounce of the strength she'd learned over the past 6 months. If you have evidence to charge my husband with a crime, charge him. Otherwise, we're leaving. Martinez's expression went hard. You're making a mistake. That's my choice to make. You think he loves you? Martinez's voice turned sharp, cruel. You think this is real? Men like Victor Vale don't love Mrs. Vale. They use. And when you're no longer useful, he'll discard you like everyone else who's gotten in his way. Elena felt Victor tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand, a silent message to let her handle this. You don't know anything about my husband, Elena said quietly. You see the file, the surveillance photos, the reputation, but you don't see the man who plays piano at 2 a.m. when he can't sleep, who grieved his best friend so deeply he made sure that friend's dying wish was honored, who looked at me when I was invisible and decided I was worth seeing. She stood straighter. So no, Detective Martinez, I won't help you, because the man I married is more than what you've reduced him to in your investigation, and I choose to believe in him. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Martinez's jaw was tight, her eyes hard with frustration. We're done here, Michael said smoothly. Unless you're planning to charge my clients with something, we'll be leaving now. Martinez waved them off with barely concealed anger. Get out. But this isn't over, Mrs. Vale. When your husband's empire comes crashing down, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. They walked out of the police station into brilliant afternoon sunshine. Elena's legs felt weak, adrenaline making her hands shake, but she'd done it. She'd faced down a detective, refused to betray Victor, and walked away on her own terms. Elena. Victor turned to her on the station steps, his expression raw. What you just did, what you just said, was the truth. Elena stepped closer. All of it. Victor pulled her into a kiss that was desperate and grateful and full of promises neither of them had words for yet. When they broke apart, Michael was politely examining his phone, pretending not to notice. We should discuss next steps, Michael said. Martinez will be back. She's not the type to give up. Then we prepare, Victor said, his arm around Elena's waist. We make sure everything is bulletproof. And if they come after either of us again, we face it together, Elena finished. No more protection, no more secrets. Together. Victor's smile was small but genuine. Together. The study group that afternoon was a welcome return to normalcy. Elena threw herself into anatomy discussions and pharmacology debates, grateful for the distraction. But Rachel kept giving her curious looks, and finally, during a break, she pulled Elena aside. Okay, what happened? Rachel demanded. You look like you've been through a war. Elena glanced at the others, then lowered her voice. Police tried to get me to testify against Victor. I said no. Rachel's eyes went wide. Holy shit. Are you okay? I think so. I don't know. Elena took a shaky breath. I made a choice to stand by him, and I'm not sure if that makes me brave or incredibly stupid. Maybe both, Rachel said gently, but for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. You can't build a life with someone if you're constantly looking for exits. Even if that someone is dangerous. Especially then. Rachel squeezed her shoulder. Love isn't safe, Elena. It never is. The question is whether it's worth the risk. Elena thought about Victor's face when she defended him to Martinez, about the way he'd kissed her on those courthouse steps like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, about the future they were trying to build despite every obstacle in their path. It's worth it, she said quietly. He's worth it. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of heightened awareness and deliberate normalcy. Victor made good on his promise of transparency, bringing Elena into meetings with his lawyers, explaining the labyrinthine structure of his legitimate businesses, and carefully not explaining the parts that weren't legitimate. Elena didn't ask for details she didn't need to know. She just needed to understand the shape of his world well enough to navigate it. They attended Sophia's fundraiser, a casual affair that felt worlds away from the polished galas they'd attended before. Elena found herself genuinely enjoying the evening, talking with nurses and doctors and community organizers who were doing the kind of work she hoped to do someday. You two seem different, Sophia observed, watching Victor and Elena dance. Lighter, like you finally figured something out. Maybe we have, Elena said. Well, whatever it is, hold on to it. Relationships like yours, where you choose each other despite every reason not to, those are the ones worth fighting for. November brought midterms and the first real cold snap of the season. Elena studied obsessively, determined to maintain her perfect grades. Victor brought her tea and forced her to eat when she forgot, and somehow they'd fallen into a domestic rhythm that felt both surreal and exactly right. I've been thinking, Victor said one evening as they sat curled together on the couch, Elena's anatomy textbook forgotten on the coffee table. About what you said, about building a different world. Elena looked up at him. Yeah? I want to step back from certain aspects of my business. The parts that keep me looking over my shoulder waiting for someone like Martinez to build a case. Victor's expression was serious. It won't happen overnight. There are obligations, debts that need to be settled carefully. But I want to move towards something cleaner, something I wouldn't be ashamed to explain to you. Elena's chest tightened with emotion. You're serious. I'm serious. I've spent 15 years building an empire on fear and violence because I thought that was the only way to survive. But you've shown me something different, something better. Victor's hand came up to cup her face. I want to be the man you think I am, even if I'm not sure I can get there. You're already closer than you think, Elena said, kissing him softly. And I'll be here, for all of it. The call came 3 days before Thanksgiving. Elena was studying in the library when her phone rang with an unknown number. Her stomach clenched. Unknown numbers had become triggers since the Martinez incident, but she answered anyway. Elena Vale? Yes? This is Judith Ward, your aunt. Elena's hand tightened on her phone. What do you want? I need help. Judith's voice was strained, almost desperate. Please, Elena. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to see you. It's about Patricia. Every instinct Elena had screamed at her to hang up, to protect herself from whatever manipulation Judith was attempting. But there was something in her aunt's voice, genuine fear maybe, that made her hesitate. What about Patricia? Please, can we meet? Just for coffee. I'll explain everything. Against her better judgment, Elena agreed. She told Victor about it that evening, bracing for his reaction. To her surprise, he simply nodded. Do you want me to come with you? He asked. No, I think I need to do this alone. To prove to myself I can. Elena looked at him. But can you have someone nearby, just in case? Victor's smile was grim. Already planning on it. The coffee shop was the same one where Elena had met Sophia, neutral territory. Judith was already waiting when Elena arrived, looking older and more worn than Elena remembered. Her expensive clothes couldn't quite hide the stress lines around her eyes. "Thank you for coming," Judith said as Elena sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure I should have." Elena kept her voice neutral. "What's this about?" Judith took a shaky breath. "Patricia is in the hospital. She hurt herself intentionally." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "She's been struggling with depression, anxiety, self-image issues. It's been getting worse for months." Judith's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "The doctors say she needs intensive treatment, but our insurance won't cover the kind of facility she needs, and Robert's business. We don't have the money, Elena." Elena stared at her aunt, understanding dawning like cold water. "You want me to ask Victor for money? I know I have no right. I know we treated you terribly, but Patricia is my daughter, and I don't know what else to do." Tears were streaming down Judith's face now, genuine and raw. "Please, I'm begging you." Elena thought about all the times Patricia had mocked her, belittled her, made her feel worthless. She thought about Judith charging her rent for a storage closet while treating her like an inconvenience. She thought about the years of cruelty, both casual and deliberate. She should say no. Should tell Judith that her family had made their choices and now they could live with the consequences. But then she thought about Patricia in a hospital bed, desperate enough to hurt herself. About mental illness and the way it didn't care whether you deserved help or not. About the person Elena had become. Someone who chose kindness over cruelty, understanding over revenge. "I'll talk to Victor," Elena said quietly. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll ask." Judith's relief was palpable. Thank you so much. But I need you to understand something." Elena leaned forward. "This doesn't fix what happened between us. This doesn't erase the years you made me feel worthless. If Victor agrees to help Patricia, it's because we believe everyone deserves a chance at healing, not because you've earned our forgiveness." Judith nodded, tears still flowing. "I understand. And Elena, I am sorry. For all of it. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I am." Elena left the coffee shop feeling emotionally drained. She found Victor waiting in the car half a block away, just as he'd promised. "How bad?" he asked as she slid into the passenger seat. Elena told him everything. When she finished, Victor was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell them to handle it themselves, that they don't deserve our help." Elena looked at her hands. "But another part of me thinks, Patricia is sick. She needs help. And maybe this is a chance to be better than they were to me." Victor reached over and took her hand. "Then we help her. Not for them, but for you. Because you're the kind of person who chooses compassion even when it's hard." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Victor's expression was soft. "I'll make some calls, find the best treatment facility in the state, cover whatever it costs." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This is your choice. I'm just making it possible." They arranged for Patricia's transfer to a private treatment facility upstate, one that specialized in intensive mental health care. Elena visited once, sitting beside her cousin's hospital bed and trying to reconcile this broken woman with the cruel girl who'd tormented her for years. "Why are you helping me?" Patricia asked, her voice hoarse. "After everything I did to you." "Because someone helped me when I needed it," Elena said simply. "And because everyone deserves a chance to heal. Even people who've done terrible things." Patricia started crying then, apologies tumbling out between sobs. Elena didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't. But she held Patricia's hand and let her cry, and when she left, she felt lighter somehow, like she'd finally closed a door that had been hanging open for too long. December arrived with the first snow and Elena's final exams. She threw herself into studying, determined to end her first semester strong. Victor gave her space, but was always there when she needed him, bringing food, offering encouragement, pulling her away from her books when she'd been studying too long. The day her final grades posted, Elena stared at her phone screen in disbelief. Straight A's, a perfect 4.0 GPA. She showed Victor that evening, and the pride in his eyes made her chest tight. "I told you that you belonged there," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I'm so proud of you, Elena. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. You just finally had the chance to prove it to yourself. Victor kissed her forehead. What you've accomplished this semester, that's all you. The 1-year anniversary of their courthouse wedding arrived on a Friday in mid-December. Neither of them mentioned it at first, the date hanging between them like a question neither wanted to ask. They'd long since passed the point where their arrangement was purely transactional. They shared a bed, shared their lives, had built something that looked disturbingly like a real marriage. But the original agreement had specified 1 year, and that year was up. Elena woke that morning to find Victor already awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "How different things are than I imagined a year ago." Victor turned to look at her. "I thought this would be simple. Marry you, provide for you, keep my promise to Marcus. I never expected—" He stopped, jaw working. "Expected what?" "This. You. Us." Victor's hand found hers under the covers. "I never expected to fall in love with you." Elena's breath caught. They danced around the word for months, implied it in touches and looks and unspoken promises. But hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Say it again," she whispered. "I love you, Elena." Victor's voice was rough with emotion. "I love who you are, who you're becoming, the way you look at the world like it's full of possibilities instead of threats. I love your kindness and your strength and your stubborn refusal to let anyone make you feel small." He paused. "I love you, and I'm terrified that you're going to leave now that your year is up." Elena felt tears slide down her cheeks. "I love you too. I think I've loved you since you played piano that first night, and let me see past all your careful control to the lonely man underneath." "So you'll stay?" Victor's grip on her hand tightened. "Not because of our arrangement, but because you want to?" "I'll stay," Elena confirmed, "for as long as you'll have me." Victor pulled her into a kiss that tasted like relief and joy and promises for the future. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "I have something for you," Victor said, reaching for the nightstand drawer. He pulled out a small velvet box. "I know you already have a ring, but I needed you to have something that meant more than a legal arrangement." Inside the box was a delicate gold locket, antique and beautiful. Elena opened it with trembling fingers and found 2 photographs inside. One of Marcus, grinning at the camera with his characteristic warmth, and one of Elena and Victor at Sophia's fundraiser, their heads close together, both of them smiling. "Marcus brought us together," Victor said quietly. "But we chose to stay. I wanted you to have something that honored both. The beginning and what we've become." Elena couldn't speak through her tears. She just threw her arms around Victor and held on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. They spent the morning in bed, making love and talking about the future in a way they'd never quite dared before. Victor told her about his plans to divest from his more questionable business ventures, to focus on the legitimate operations that were already thriving. Elena talked about her plans for after graduation, her interest in Sophia's clinic, her dreams of helping people who fell through the cracks the way she once had. "I want to build something good," Elena said. "Something that helps people instead of hurting them." "Then we'll build it together," Victor promised. "Whatever you need, whatever you want to create, I'll make it possible." That evening, Victor took her to the piano room. He'd been teaching her to play over the past few months, patient with her fumbling fingers and lack of natural talent. "Sit with me," he said, settling onto the bench. Elena sat, and together they played a simple piece, Claire de Lune, which Victor had been teaching her for weeks. Elena's part was basic, just a few supporting notes, but when their melodies intertwined, it created something beautiful. "We're like this," Victor said when they finished. "You have your melody, I have mine. They're different, sometimes discordant, but together they make something better than either of us could create alone." Elena kissed him, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "How did I get so lucky?" "I ask myself the same thing every day." Victor rested his forehead against hers. "You saved me, Elena, from a life where I was powerful but completely alone, where I had everything except the one thing that mattered." "What's that?" "Someone to come home to. Someone who sees all of me, the darkness and the damage and the desperate need to be better, and chooses to stay anyway. Victor's voice cracked. You chose to stay. I'll always choose you, Elena whispered. Always. Christmas came, and with it, a quiet celebration in their penthouse. They'd invited Sophia and David, along with Elena's study group and Michael the lawyer, who turned out to be Sophia's younger brother. The gathering was small and warm, nothing like the formal events they usually attended. Elena looked around at the people filling their home with laughter and conversation and realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. Not blood and obligation and conditional acceptance, but choice and love, and the decision to show up for each other. Victor found her in the kitchen, ostensibly checking on dinner, but really just taking a moment to breathe. You okay? He asked, his arms coming around her from behind. Better than okay. Elena leaned back against him. I'm happy. Really, truly happy. I didn't know I could feel like this. Neither did I. Victor pressed a kiss to her temple. Thank you for giving me this. For giving us this. They stood like that for a long moment, watching their friends through the doorway, and Elena thought about how far she'd come, from the invisible girl apologizing for existing to a woman who'd built a life worth living, from a marriage of obligation to a love that had surprised them both. The spring semester brought new challenges. Elena's coursework intensified, clinical rotations began, and she found herself working 12-hour days between classes and hospital shifts. But she loved it, loved the work, loved helping patients, loved finally using her brain and her hands to make a tangible difference. Victor supported her through all of it, adjusting his schedule to accommodate hers, making sure she ate and slept and didn't burn herself out completely. And when she came home exhausted and overwhelmed, he was there to hold her and remind her why it mattered. You're going to be an incredible nurse, he told her one night after a particularly brutal shift. Your patients are lucky to have you. I made so many mistakes today, Elena said, her voice thick with frustration. I forgot to check a patient's medication history. I fumbled an IV insertion. You're learning. That's allowed. Victor tilted her chin up. You're going to make mistakes, Elena. Everyone does. What matters is that you care enough to learn from them, that you show up every day trying to be better than you were yesterday. Elena kissed him gratefully. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Victor's smile was soft. You've taught me more about being human in the past year than I learned in the previous 35. March brought unexpected news. Elena was in the hospital break room when Sophia found her, practically vibrating with excitement. I just got off the phone with a donor, Sophia said. Someone who wants to fund a massive expansion of the clinic. New facility, more staff, mobile units to serve communities that can't come to us. It's everything we've been dreaming of. That's amazing, Elena said. Who's the donor? Anonymous. They just said they believe in our mission and want to make sure we can help as many people as possible. Sophia's eyes were bright with tears. This changes everything, Elena. We can actually do the work we've been talking about for years. Elena had a suspicion about who the anonymous donor might be, and that evening she confronted Victor about it. Did you donate to Sophia's clinic? She asked without preamble. Victor looked up from his laptop. I might have. Victor, you talked about wanting to work there after graduation, about building something good. Victor's expression was carefully neutral. I wanted to make sure that option would still be available when you were ready. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. How much did you donate? Enough to make a difference. Victor closed his laptop. And before you argue, it's money I would have spent on something far less important. At least this way it's helping people, helping you build the future you want. I love you, Elena said fiercely. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the last few hours. Victor pulled her into his lap. Feel free to remind me as often as you'd like. Summer arrived with Elena's second year of nursing school on the horizon and Victor's business transformation well underway. He'd sold off several of his more questionable operations, paid off old debts, and was focusing on legitimate ventures that didn't require looking over his shoulder constantly. Detective Martinez had gone quiet, though Victor's lawyers assured them she was still building her case. But without Elena's cooperation and with Victor's meticulous record-keeping, making it nearly impossible to prove anything illegal, the investigation had stalled. She'll try again, Michael warned them. People like Martinez don't give up. Let her try, Elena said, with more confidence than she felt. We'll face it when it comes. Victor squeezed her hand, pride and love evident in his expression. The engagement party invitation arrived in late July, embossed and elegant. Robert and Judith Ward request the honor of your presence at a celebration for their daughter Patricia's engagement to Thomas Morrison. Elena stared at the invitation for a long moment, processing the information. Patricia was getting married. Patricia, who'd spent months in treatment and was apparently healthy enough now to plan a future with someone. Do you want to go? Victor asked, reading over her shoulder. I don't know. Part of me is happy for her. Part of me still remembers everything she did. Elena set down the invitation. What do you think? I think you should do whatever feels right. If you want to go and show her you're genuinely happy she's doing better, we go. If you want to decline and maintain your distance, that's valid too. Victor's hand found hers. There's no wrong answer here, Elena. In the end, they decided to attend. Not for Judith or Robert, but because Elena wanted to believe people could change. That healing was possible. That forgiveness, even when it wasn't complete, could create space for something better. The party was smaller than Elena expected, held in the Ward family garden on a warm August evening. Patricia looked healthier than Elena had seen her in years, genuinely smiling as she introduced her fiancé to various guests. When she spotted Elena and Victor, her expression went uncertain. Elena, I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either, Elena admitted. But I'm glad you're doing well, Patricia. Really. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the mess I gave you in the hospital. I was cruel to you for years, and there's no excuse for that. I was drowning in my own misery, and I took it out on you because you were an easy target. I know. I'm trying to be better, to actually deal with my issues instead of projecting them onto everyone else. Patricia glanced at her fiancé, who was talking with Robert across the garden. Thomas has been helping me see things differently, see myself differently. I'm glad, Elena said, and meant it. Everyone deserves a chance to heal. Even people who don't deserve forgiveness? Elena considered the question. Forgiveness isn't about deserving it. It's about choosing not to carry the weight of someone else's mistakes anymore. I've forgiven you, Patricia. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to it was hurting me more than it was hurting you. Patricia hugged her then, sudden and desperate, and Elena let her. When they separated, both were crying. Thank you, Patricia whispered, for helping me, for being better than I ever was to you. They didn't stay long at the party, but leaving, Elena felt lighter, like she'd finally closed the last door on her old life and could fully step into her new one. You handled that beautifully, Victor said as they drove home. Marcus would have been proud. I think he'd be proud of both of us, Elena said. We're not the same people we were a year ago. No, Victor agreed. We're better. The final semester of nursing school was brutal. Elena's clinical rotations were demanding, her coursework intense, and she spent more nights studying than sleeping. But Victor was there through all of it, bringing her coffee at midnight, quizzing her on pharmacology, holding her when the stress became too much. One more month, he reminded her when she was certain she couldn't handle another day. One more month, and you're done. You can do this. What if I can't? Then you'll try again. But you won't need to because you're brilliant and capable, and you've already proven you can handle anything. Victor kissed her forehead. I believe in you, Elena, even when you don't believe in yourself. Graduation day arrived sunny and perfect. Elena stood with her classmates in their crisp white uniforms, listening to speeches about dedication and service and making a difference in the world. When her name was called and she walked across that stage to receive her degree, she looked out into the audience and found Victor on his feet, applauding with a pride that made her chest ache. After the ceremony, he pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. So incredibly proud. I did it, Elena said, still not quite believing it. I actually did it. You did? Victor pulled back enough to see her face. What comes next? Elena thought about Sophia's clinic, about the expansion that was almost complete, about the opportunity to help people who needed it most. She thought about the future she'd built for herself, the life she'd claimed despite every obstacle. Now I changed the world, she said with a confidence that would have been impossible 2 years ago. One patient at a time. The gala invitation arrived in early December, elegant and official. The Pierce Foundation cordially invites you to their annual winter benefit, black tie, silent auction, all proceeds supporting medical education scholarships for underprivileged students. We should go, Elena said, reading the details. This is exactly the kind of thing I want to support. Then we'll go, Victor agreed. Though I have to warn you, these events have become dangerous for me. Dangerous how? Because you'll be there in some stunning dress, and I'll spend the entire evening wanting to take you home. Victor's smile was wicked. Very distracting for a man trying to maintain his reputation. Elena laughed and kissed him. I think your reputation can handle it. The night of the gala, Elena chose a dress in deep sapphire blue that made Victor's eyes darken with appreciation when she emerged from their bedroom. They'd long since started sharing a room completely. Elena's old bedroom converted into a study where she could work without disturbing Victor when he had late nights. You're stunning, Victor said, offering his arm. Absolutely stunning. The gala was held at the Grand Pavilion, a venue Elena had only seen in magazines. The ballroom was magnificent, all gold and crystal in elaborate floral arrangements. The crowd was the usual mix of wealth and power, but Elena no longer felt like an imposter among them. She'd earned her place here. Through her own work, her own accomplishments, her own determination to be more than what her family had told her she could be. Elena, Victor, so glad you could make it. They turned to find Sophia and David approaching, both dressed elegantly for the occasion. We wouldn't miss it, Elena said, hugging her friend. This cause is too important. Speaking of important causes, Sophia said, her eyes gleaming, I have news. We're opening a second clinic location in Queens, and I want you to head it up. Full-time position, competitive salary, complete autonomy to build the program however you think best. Elena's breath caught. Sophia, you're the best new nurse I've seen in a decade. You care about the work, you connect with patients, and you understand what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. Sophia gripped her hand. Say yes, please. I need someone I can trust, and that's you. Elena looked at Victor, who was smiling with unconcealed pride. Say yes, he urged. This is everything you've wanted. Yes, Elena said, her voice strong. Yes, I'll do it. Sophia pulled her into a hug, and David shook Victor's hand, and for a moment everything felt perfect. Like all the struggle and pain and growth had led to exactly this moment. The evening progressed in a blur of conversation and dancing and silent auction bidding. Elena found herself genuinely enjoying the event, no longer worried about saying the wrong thing or making some unforgivable social error. She was confident now, comfortable in her own skin in a way she'd never been before. You've changed so much, Victor said as they danced. Do you realize that? I think we both have. Elena looked up at him. You're different too, lighter, like you're not carrying the weight of the world anymore. That's because I finally have something worth protecting that isn't built on violence and fear. Victor's hand tightened at her waist. I have you. I have us. I have a future I actually want to live in. I love you, Elena said, the words as natural as breathing now. I love the life we've built. I love you too. Victor leaned down to kiss her, right there in the middle of the dance floor with hundreds of people watching, more than I ever thought I could love anything. They swayed together as the music played, and Elena thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago. Scared, invisible, convinced she didn't deserve anything good. That girl would never have believed she could end up here. Successful, confident, loved beyond measure by a man who saw her as his equal and his partner. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She was Elena Vale, nurse and advocate, and the woman who'd chosen love when it would have been easier to run. The woman who'd faced down police detectives and cruel family members and her own deep-seated belief that she wasn't worth fighting for. And she'd won. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate, and Victor pulled her closer. Dance with me forever, he murmured against her hair. It wasn't quite a proposal. They were already married, after all, but it felt like one anyway. Like a promise of all the years to come, all the challenges they'd face together, all the joy they'd find in the life they were building. Forever, Elena agreed. I wouldn't want anything less. They left the gala early, unable to resist the pull toward home and privacy and each other. In the car, Victor held her hand and pressed kisses to her knuckles, and Elena felt happiness settle into her bones like something permanent and real. "Thank you," Victor said as they pulled up to their building. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible too. For choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. For teaching me that love doesn't have to be a weapon." Victor's eyes were bright with emotion. "For everything, Elena. For all of it." Elena cupped his face in her hands and kissed him with everything she felt, gratitude and passion, and the absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. "You saved me too," she whispered, "from a life where I was too afraid to take up space, where I apologized for existing instead of demanding the world make room for me. You saw me when no one else did, and you gave me the tools to see myself." "We saved each other," Victor said. "That's how this works." They went upstairs to their penthouse, to the life they'd built together from grief and obligation, and something neither of them had expected. And as Elena stood in their living room looking out at the city lights with Victor's arms around her, she thought about Marcus. He'd brought them together with his dying wish. He'd believed Victor could protect her, and that Elena could help Victor find something beyond violence and isolation. He'd seen a future for both of them that neither could imagine for themselves. And he'd been right. "Thank you, Marcus," Elena whispered to the night, "for knowing what we needed before we did." Victor's arms tightened around her, and Elena knew he'd heard, knew he was thinking the same thing. Marcus was gone, but his gift remained, not just in the promise that had brought them together, but in what they'd chosen to become. Two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other, two lonely souls who'd built a family from choice and love and stubborn determination. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked. Elena turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her partner, her love, her home. "I'm thinking that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, that everything that happened, all the pain and struggle and fear, led to this, to us. Do you regret any of it?" Elena considered the question seriously. The years with her cruel family, the grief of losing Marcus, the terrifying leap into an arranged marriage with a dangerous stranger. All the moments she had doubted herself, all the times she'd wanted to run, all the obstacles that had seemed insurmountable. "No," she said finally, "not a single moment, because it all brought me here, to you, to this life we've built together." Victor kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promises for all the years to come. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them smiling through tears, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she'd found what she'd been looking for all along. Not a rescuer or a protector or someone to complete her, but a partner, an equal, someone who'd seen her at her weakest and most invisible and had chosen to stand beside her while she found her own strength. Someone who loved her not despite her flaws and fears, but because of everything she was and everything she was becoming. Someone who'd been just as lost as she was until they'd found each other. And that, Elena thought as Victor led her to their bedroom, was the best kind of love story there was. Not a fairy tale of rescue and instant transformation, but a real story of two people choosing each other every single day, choosing to grow together, to face challenges together, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. It wasn't perfect, it would never be perfect, but it was theirs, and that made it extraordinary.